The entire town laughed when the fat bride walked into the courthouse in her dead mother's dress. They laughed harder when Cole Bennett, the mysterious rancher with the scarred hand, said, "I do." What those people didn't know, what Abigail herself didn't know, was that this wasn't a marriage of convenience. This was the end of a 15-year obsession. Hidden beneath the floorboards of Cole's barn was a rusted tin box containing letters he'd written about her since he was 13 years old. Every single one about her. This is their story. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The courthouse steps creaked under Abigail Boone's weight, and she heard the sound like a gunshot in the October silence. 31 years old, and she still flinched at noises like that. Sounds that drew attention, sounds that made people look. And they were looking now. Mrs. Edith Carmichael stood near the hitching post with her daughter, both of them in proper Sunday dresses despite it being Thursday. Edith's face did that thing it always did when she saw Abigail, a tightening around the mouth, like she'd bitten into something spoiled. The daughter, pretty little Sarah with her 16-year-old waist, didn't even bother hiding her smile. "Lord have mercy," Edith said, not quite whispering. "Is that Margaret Boone's wedding dress?" It was. The ivory silk had gone yellow in places, and Abigail had needed to let out the seams so far that the original stitching showed like scars. Her mother had been a small woman, delicate. Everything Abigail wasn't and never would be. She climbed the steps anyway, her father's hand trembling on her arm. Thomas Boone looked like death warmed over, which wasn't far from the truth. The consumption had been eating him from the inside out for 6 months now, turning a man who'd once broken horses with his bare hands into something brittle and hollow. He couldn't work, couldn't manage the ranch, could barely stand long enough to walk his only daughter down the courthouse aisle to marry a man she'd spoken to maybe 3 times in her entire life. "You don't have to do this," her father wheezed as they reached the door. "We'll find another way." They both knew that was a lie. The bank had given them until December, and December was 8 weeks away. You couldn't pay off 5 years of bad debt and medical bills in 8 weeks, not when you were too sick to work and too unmarriageable to do what Abigail was about to do. "It's fine, Papa," she said. Inside, the courthouse smelled like old wood and lamp oil. Judge Morrison stood behind his desk, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. And next to him, waiting with his hat in his hands, was Cole Bennett. Abigail had seen him around town maybe 6 times since he'd arrived in Dust Creek 3 months ago. He'd bought the old Peterson place at auction. Cash money, people said, which raised eyebrows because the Peterson place wasn't cheap, and Cole Bennett looked like he'd spent most of his life eating dust. He was tall, which most men were compared to Abigail. Lean in a way that suggested he'd been hungry more than once. His face had the kind of angles that came from hard living, sharp jaw, deep-set eyes, a nose that had been broken at least twice. His hands were scarred, the knuckles knotted like old rope. He looked at her when she walked in, and Abigail felt her face go hot. She knew what he saw, the same thing everyone saw. A big woman, heavy through the middle, heavy through the hips, arms that jiggled when she moved, a face that might have been pleasant enough if it wasn't attached to a body like hers, plain brown hair pulled back severe because anything else looked ridiculous on someone her size. But Cole Bennett didn't look away, didn't let his eyes slide to the side like most men did, like they were embarrassed for her. He just looked at her straight on, his face unreadable. "Miss Boone," he said. His voice was rough, like he didn't use it much. "Mr. Bennett." Judge Morrison cleared his throat. "Well, shall we get this done? I've got the Hendricks cattle dispute at 2. The ceremony lasted maybe 3 minutes. Judge Morrison read from a book he'd read from 1,000 times before, his voice flat with practice. "Do you take this woman? Do you take this man? In sickness and health, for richer or poorer?" Abigail's father coughed into his handkerchief, wet and rattling. "I do," Cole said, when it was his turn. The words came out steady. Final. Like he meant them, which was absurd because this wasn't that kind of marriage. This was a business arrangement. Abigail kept the ranch. Cole got whatever he got out of this. Land, maybe. Respectability. She hadn't asked because she didn't want to know. "I do," she echoed when Judge Morrison looked at her. "Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Montana, I pronounce you man and wife. You can kiss her if you want, but you don't have to." Cole Bennett leaned down. He had to lean because Abigail was 5'4" and he was at least 6 feet, and pressed his lips to her forehead. Quick, gentle. It was the kindest thing anyone had done for her in years, and she hated that it made her eyes sting. Outside, Edith Carmichael and her daughter had been joined by a small crowd. Word traveled fast in Dust Creek, especially when it was the kind of word people could chew on for weeks. "Well," Edith said as Abigail and Cole emerged, "congratulations, I suppose." Her tone said what her words didn't. What kind of desperate man marries that? Abigail felt her father stiffen beside her, but before he could say anything stupid and make things worse, Cole stepped forward. "Thank you, Mrs. Carmichael," he said. "I appreciate you coming out to wish us well." His face stayed pleasant, but something in his voice made Edith's smile falter. She gathered her skirts and hurried off, Sarah trailing behind her like a confused puppy. The rest of the crowd dispersed slowly, disappointed there hadn't been more of a scene. Cole had a wagon waiting. He helped Abigail's father into the back, gentle despite Thomas's protests, then offered Abigail his hand. She took it because she had to, and his palm was rough with calluses, but warm. "The ranch is about an hour's ride," Thomas said once they were moving. "The house needs work. Roof leaks in the back bedroom, and the stove's been temperamental since spring." "I'll take a look," Cole said. They rode in silence after that. The October landscape rolled by. Brown grass, scattered pine, the mountains in the distance already white with early snow. Dust Creek fell behind them until it was just a smudge on the horizon. Abigail's ranch sat in a valley about 6 miles from town. 200 acres that her grandfather had claimed in 1867, back when Montana was still wild, and you could die 100 different ways before breakfast. The house was small, 2 bedrooms and a kitchen that doubled as a sitting room. The barn was bigger, relatively speaking, and in better repair because Thomas Boone had always cared more about his horses than his own comfort. There were only 3 horses left now. Abigail had sold the rest over the past year, watching her father's legacy dwindle down to almost nothing. Cole pulled the wagon up to the house and helped Thomas inside. The old man was gray with exhaustion, his breathing labored. Abigail got him settled in his bed, pulled the quilts up to his chin. "You did good today, girl," Thomas said, his voice barely a whisper. "Rest, Papa." She found Cole in the kitchen, standing in the middle of the room like he wasn't sure what to do with himself. He'd put his hat back on, which was wrong somehow. You didn't wear your hat inside your own house, but Abigail didn't have the energy to tell him. "I'll take the spare room," Cole said. "Don't want to presume." Of course, because this wasn't a real marriage. This was an arrangement, a transaction. She'd get to keep her land, he'd get whatever he wanted out of this. And in a year, maybe 2, they'd quietly dissolve the whole thing and pretend it never happened. "Fine," Abigail said. "Is there anything you need me to do before dark?" There were 1,000 things that needed doing. The fence line on the east pasture was down. The chicken coop needed new wire. The well pump had been making a grinding noise for weeks, but Abigail was tired and her dress was too tight and she wanted this day to be over. "No," she said. Cole nodded. He stood there a moment longer like he wanted to say something else, but then he just turned and walked out. Abigail waited until she heard the door close before she let herself sink into one of the kitchen chairs. The ivory silk dress pulled across her middle, the seams straining. Her mother had been married in this dress. Her mother had been beautiful, delicate, everything a woman should be. Abigail had spent her entire life trying not to compare herself to Margaret Boone's memory, and failing every single time. She stood up, went to her bedroom, and changed into her regular clothes, a simple cotton dress that actually fit, sturdy boots, an apron that had seen better days. Then she went out to feed the horses because they didn't care what she looked like, or who she'd married, or why. The barn was dim and cool, smelling of hay and horse and old leather. The 3 remaining animals, a bay gelding, a paint mare, and an ancient gray that had been her father's favorite, nickered softly when she appeared. "Hey, babies," Abigail murmured, running her hand down the bay's nose. "You hungry?" She measured out grain, distributed hay, checked water buckets. Simple tasks. Familiar. The kind of work that didn't judge her, or whisper about her, or look at her like she was something pitiful. She was latching the bay's stall when she heard footsteps behind her. Cole stood in the barn doorway, backlit by the late afternoon sun. He'd taken off his jacket and his shirt sleeves were rolled up to his elbows. The scars on his hands were more visible now, old burns maybe, or rope marks. Hard to tell. Thought you might need help, he said. I'm fine. I can see that. He stepped inside, looked around. This is good work. Your father taught you? My father taught me everything. Cole nodded. He moved to the gray's stall, let the old horse sniff his hand. What's his name? Smoke. He's 23. That's old for a horse. He's earned his retirement. They stood there in the quiet, the only sounds the horses shifting in their stalls and the wind moving through the gaps in the barn walls. Why did you do this? Abigail asked suddenly. The question came out sharper than she'd intended, but she couldn't take it back. Cole didn't answer right away. He kept his attention on Smoke, stroking the horse's gray neck. Needed a place to settle, he said finally. You needed help. Seemed like it worked out. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got right now. Abigail felt something hot and bitter rise in her chest. You could have had any woman in Dust Creek. Sarah Carmichael would have fainted if you'd looked at her twice. But you chose me. Why? Cole turned to face her then, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. It wasn't pity. It wasn't disgust. It was something else entirely, something she couldn't name. Maybe, he said quietly, I didn't want Sarah Carmichael. He left before she could respond, walking back out into the fading sunlight. Abigail stood there in the barn, her heart doing something strange in her chest, and tried to convince herself that none of it meant anything. The first week of marriage was awkward and silent. Cole woke before dawn and worked until dark. He fixed the fence line on the east pasture without being asked. He patched the roof, cleaned the chimney, replaced the broken boards on the front porch. He moved through the ranch like a man who knew hard work, his movements efficient and practiced. He didn't talk much, didn't make demands, didn't try to touch her or look at her in ways that made her uncomfortable. It should have been a relief. Instead, it made Abigail nervous. She cooked meals because that's what wives did, even wives in name only. Breakfast at dawn, dinner at noon, supper after dark. Cole ate everything she put in front of him without complaint, thanked her quietly, and went back to work. Thomas stayed in his room most days, too weak to do much more than sit by the window and watch the ranch he'd built slip through his fingers. Abigail brought him meals, helped him wash, pretended not to notice how much smaller he looked every day. He's a good worker, Thomas said one afternoon, nodding toward the window where Cole was digging post holes for a new section of fence. Knows what he's doing. Seems like it. You could do worse, Abby. She didn't answer that. Couldn't. On the 8th day, Abigail went to the barn to check on the horses and found Cole in one of the empty stalls, surrounded by tools and lumber. What are you doing? She asked. Building a feed room. Keep the grain dry and away from the rats. I didn't ask you to do that. I know. He didn't look up from his work. Needed doing anyway. Abigail watched him for a moment. He moved with the kind of confidence that came from years of this kind of labor, measuring, cutting, fitting boards together with precise movements. His shirt was damp with sweat despite the October chill, and she could see the muscles in his shoulders flex as he worked. Where did you learn to build? She asked. Here and there. Worked construction in Denver for a while, logging camps up north, ranch hand in Wyoming. You pick things up. That's a lot of places. I moved around. Running from something? Cole's hand stilled on the board he was holding. He looked at her then, and something in his expression made her wish she'd kept her mouth shut. Maybe, he said, or running toward something. Hard to tell sometimes. He went back to work, and Abigail left because she didn't know what else to do. That night, after supper, Thomas asked Cole to help him to the porch. The old man wanted to see the stars, he said. Wanted to feel the night air. Abigail helped settle him in his chair, wrapped blankets around his shoulders. Stay out here with me, girl, Thomas said. Both of you. So they did. Abigail sat on the porch steps, and Cole leaned against the railing, and they watched the sky turn from purple to black while Thomas dozed in his chair. My father built this house with his own hands, Abigail said after a while. Him and my grandfather. Took them 2 years. They lived in a tent while they did it. That's hard living. They were hard men. Had to be back then. Cole was quiet for a moment. Your mother? Died when I was 12, fever. By the time the doctor came from town, it was too late. I'm sorry, Abigail shrugged. It was a long time ago. But that wasn't true. It hadn't been long enough. Not nearly. She was beautiful, Abigail continued, not sure why she was talking about this. Tiny little thing. Everyone in Dust Creek said she looked like a doll, and she did. Perfect and delicate and everything a woman should be. That must have been hard, Cole said quietly. Being compared to that. Abigail looked at him sharply. What? Growing up in her shadow, trying to measure up to something that couldn't be measured. The words hit her like a physical blow. No one had ever said it out loud before. No one had ever acknowledged that, yes, it had been hard. That, yes, she had spent her entire life being reminded that she was nothing like her beautiful mother. That she was big where Margaret had been small, plain where Margaret had been lovely, awkward where Margaret had been graceful. I don't want to talk about this, Abigail said. All right. They sat in silence after that, listening to Thomas's labored breathing and the distant sound of coyotes in the hills. 2 weeks into the marriage, the first real cold snap hit. Abigail woke to frost on the windows and the sound of her father coughing in the next room, deep, wet coughs that seemed to go on forever. She pulled on her robe and hurried to his room. Thomas was sitting up in bed, his face gray, the handkerchief in his hand spotted with blood. "Papa, I'm fine," he wheezed, just the cold settling in. He wasn't fine. He was dying, and they both knew it. Abigail got him water, propped pillows behind his back, tried to make him comfortable. But there was only so much she could do. Cole appeared in the doorway, already dressed despite the early hour. "I'll ride to town. Get the doctor." "No," Thomas said. "No doctors. They can't do anything anyway except take money we don't have." "Papa?" "No, Abigail. I mean it." Cole looked at Abigail, and she saw something like helplessness in his face. It was strange seeing that expression on a man who seemed so capable of everything else. "I'll get the fire going," Cole said finally. "Get the house warm." He left, and Abigail stayed with her father, holding his hand while he drifted in and out of fevered sleep. By midday, the house was warm, but Thomas was worse. His breathing had gone shallow and rapid, and he kept calling for Margaret like she was in the next room waiting for him. Abigail sat beside his bed and felt the world narrowing down to this: her father dying, winter coming, and a stranger in her house who'd married her for reasons she still didn't understand. Cole brought her food she didn't eat and coffee she barely tasted. He didn't try to make her leave her father's side. Didn't offer empty platitudes about how everything would be fine. He just stayed nearby, solid and quiet, like he knew that sometimes the only thing you could do for someone was not leave them alone with their grief. Thomas Boone died 3 days later, just after midnight, with Abigail holding one hand and Cole holding the other. The funeral was small. A handful of people from town who remembered Thomas from his better days, plus the minister and the undertaker. They buried him next to Margaret in the little cemetery on the edge of Dust Creek, and Abigail stood there in her black dress while the minister said words that meant nothing. Edith Carmichael approached her afterward, her face arranged in an expression of sympathy that looked practiced. "Such a loss," Edith said, "but at least you have your husband to take care of you now." Abigail wanted to scream. Wanted to tell Edith that Cole wasn't her husband, not really, and that she didn't need taking care of anyway. But she just nodded and said thank you and waited until everyone left before she let herself cry. Cole drove them home in silence. The ranch looked smaller somehow, emptier, like Thomas Boone's absence had taken up physical space. "I'll take care of the horses," Cole said when they arrived. Abigail nodded. She went inside, sat at the kitchen table, and tried to figure out what she was supposed to do now. Her father was gone. The ranch was hers, but only because she'd married a man she barely knew. She had 8 weeks before the bank came calling and no idea how to pay them. She was alone in every way that mattered, or maybe not entirely alone. Cole came in an hour later, stamping snow off his boots. He hung his coat by the door, turned to look at her. "You should eat something," he said. "I'm not hungry." "Eat anyway." It wasn't a suggestion. Abigail felt a flicker of irritation. Who was he to tell her what to do in her own house? But then she saw the look on his face. Not commanding, not bossy, concerned. "Fine," she said. Cole made eggs and toast, simple food that didn't require much thought. He put a plate in front of her and sat down across the table with his own. They ate in silence. "The bank," Abigail said finally. They'll want their money by December. I know. Do you have it? Cole looked at her steadily. Some. Not all. How much? About half. Abigail felt something loosen in her chest. Half was more than she had. Half was more than she'd hoped for. I can sell the horses, she said. That might cover the rest. No. What? Don't sell the horses. We'll find another way. There is no other way. I've sold everything else. Cole leaned back in his chair, his face thoughtful. What about cattle? We don't have cattle. Haven't for years. But you have grazing land. And winter's coming, which means prices will drop. We could buy cheap now, hold them through spring, sell high when everyone else is buying. Abigail stared at him. That's risky. So is selling your last 3 horses. He had a point, but it still felt reckless, dangerous, the kind of gamble that could destroy them if it went wrong. Why are you doing this? Abigail asked for the second time since they'd been married. You could walk away. The ranch is in my name. The debt is my problem. But you're sitting here talking about buying cattle like you actually care what happens to this place. Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I made a promise when I married you, to help you keep this land. I don't break promises. Even ones you made to someone like me? The words came out bitter, ugly, and Abigail regretted them immediately. But Cole just looked at her with those steady, unreadable eyes and said, especially those. They bought 20 head of cattle a week later with money Cole somehow produced. Abigail didn't ask where he'd gotten it, didn't want to know if he'd mortgaged his own land or sold something valuable or done something worse. She just helped him drive the cattle to the east pasture and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. November arrived with freezing rain and early snow. The ranch turned gray and white, the landscape harsh and unforgiving. Abigail spent her days keeping the house warm, tending to the animals, and trying not to feel her father's absence in every corner of the place he'd built. Cole worked from dawn until long after dark. He reinforced the barn against the coming storms, stocked up on hay and grain, checked the cattle twice daily to make sure none had wandered off or gotten injured. He barely spoke, barely slept. Abigail caught him one night in the barn, past midnight, sitting on a hay bale with his head in his hands. He looked exhausted, worn down to nothing. You should sleep, she said from the doorway. Cole's head snapped up. For just a second, she saw something raw in his face, fear maybe, or desperation, but then it was gone, replaced by his usual careful blankness. Just checking the feed inventory, he said. At midnight? Couldn't sleep anyway. Abigail stepped into the barn, her breath fogging in the cold air. Is this about the cattle? Are you worried we made a mistake? No. Then what? Cole stood up, brushed hay off his pants. Nothing. I'm fine. But he wasn't fine. Abigail could see it in the tension of his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. Whatever he was carrying, it was heavy. Cole, I said I'm fine, Abigail. It was the first time he'd snapped at her, and it shocked them both. Cole's face went carefully neutral again, but the damage was done. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I didn't mean, it's late, Abigail interrupted. We should both get some sleep. She turned and walked back to the house, leaving him standing in the barn. That night, lying in her bed, Abigail heard him moving around in the spare room. Footsteps, the creak of floorboards, the sound of something being moved. She told herself it was none of her business what her husband did in his own room. She told herself she didn't care, but sleep was a long time coming. The next morning, Cole was gone. His coat was missing from the hook by the door. His horse was gone from the barn. No note, no explanation. Abigail felt something cold settle in her stomach. Had he left? Had he finally decided this was too much trouble, too much risk, too much everything? She fed the horses with shaking hands, checked the cattle, started a fire in the stove. Normal tasks. Routine. The kind of work that kept you from falling apart. Cole returned just after noon, his horse lathered with sweat despite the cold. He had a bundle strapped to his saddle. Supplies, Abigail realized. Flour, sugar, coffee, salt. Things they were running low on. Went to town, he said when he saw her watching from the porch. Thought we could use some things. Relief flooded through her, so strong it made her knees weak. He hadn't left. He'd just gone to town. You could have told me, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Cole looked at her and something shifted in his expression. Understanding, maybe. You thought I left. I didn't. I wouldn't do that, Abigail. Not without talking to you first. You don't owe me explanations. Maybe not, but I'm giving you one anyway. He swung down from his horse, started untying the supplies. I'm here until you tell me to leave. That's the deal. Abigail wanted to argue, wanted to tell him there was no deal. This whole marriage was a sham. He could leave whenever he wanted. But the words stuck in her throat because somewhere along the way, she'd started relying on him, started expecting him to be there. And that was dangerous. I'm making stew for supper, she said instead. If you're hungry. I'm always hungry, Cole said, and there was something almost like a smile in his voice. That night, after the meal, Abigail went to the barn to check on the horses one last time. It was a habit her father had taught her. Always check before bed, make sure everyone's safe and sound. Smoke, the old gray, was lying down in his stall, which was unusual. He was an old horse with old horse aches, and he usually stayed on his feet to keep his joints from stiffening up. Abigail let herself into the stall, ran her hands over his legs, checking for heat or swelling. Everything seemed fine, but something felt off. Come on, old man, she murmured. Up you go. Smoke lifted his head but didn't stand. Abigail felt worry start to gnaw at her. Horses that went down and didn't get up, that was bad. That was sometimes the beginning of the end. Cole, she called. He was there in seconds, moving fast. What's wrong? Smoke won't get up. Together they coaxed the old horse to his feet. It took time and patience, but finally Smoke stood, shaking slightly. Abigail checked him over again, found nothing obviously wrong. Could be colic, Cole said, or just old age. We'll watch him. They did. For hours they took turns sitting with Smoke, making sure he didn't go down again. Cole brought blankets and coffee, and they settled in for a long night. My father loved this horse, Abigail said sometime around 2 a.m. Got him as a colt the year I was born. They grew up together. That's a long time. 23 years. Seems impossible, doesn't it? That something could last that long. Cole was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Some things are worth lasting for. Abigail looked at him across the dim barn. This strange man who'd married her for reasons she still didn't understand, who worked himself to exhaustion on her ranch, who sat up all night with an old horse because he knew it mattered to her. Why did you really marry me? She asked. And don't tell me it was convenient. There's nothing convenient about any of this. Cole's face was half in shadow, impossible to read. Would you believe me if I told you? I don't know. Try me. He looked at her for a long moment, and Abigail saw something complicated move across his features. Hesitation, fear, longing, things she couldn't name. Not yet, he said finally. But soon. I promise. It wasn't an answer, but somehow it was enough. Smoke made it through the night. By morning he was eating hay and looking annoyed at all the fuss, which meant he was going to be fine. Abigail walked back to the house as the sun came up, exhausted and cold and strangely content. Cole walked beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Thank you, she said, for staying up with him. He's a good horse, worth losing sleep over. They reached the porch, and Abigail turned to say something else. What, she wasn't sure. But Cole was looking at her with an expression that made her breath catch. Not pity, never pity. Something else. Something that felt like recognition, like he was seeing parts of her that no one else had ever bothered to look for. I should get started on the morning chores, he said, breaking the moment. Right. Yes, me too. He headed toward the barn, and Abigail went inside, her heart doing that strange thing again, the thing she couldn't name and didn't trust. She was scared, she realized, scared of whatever was building between them, scared of what it might mean, scared of what would happen when it all fell apart. Because in Abigail Boone's experience, everything good eventually did. December arrived mean and cold, the kind of cold that made your bones ache and your breath freeze in your lungs. The cattle huddled together in the east pasture, their backs crusted with snow, and Abigail watched them from the kitchen window while she kneaded bread dough with hands that wouldn't quite warm up, no matter how close she stood to the stove. Cole was out there with them, checking their condition, making sure none had gotten separated from the herd. He did that 3 times a day now, every day, no matter the weather. Abigail had stopped trying to tell him it was too much. He didn't listen anyway. The bank letter had arrived yesterday. She'd left it unopened on the kitchen table for 6 hours before she'd finally worked up the courage to read it. Payment due, December 20th. Full amount, no extensions. That gave them 19 days. Abigail punched the dough harder than necessary, flour puffing up around her fists. The cattle sale wouldn't happen until spring. Cole's money covered half the debt, maybe a bit more, but the rest... You're going to beat that dough to death if you're not careful. She jumped, turned to find Cole standing in the doorway, snow melting off his shoulders. She hadn't heard him come in. It needs working, she said. It needs mercy. He crossed to the stove, poured himself coffee from the pot she kept going all day. You read the letter. Not a question. Abigail nodded. Cole took a long drink, his face unreadable over the rim of the cup. We'll figure it out. How? Unless you've got another miracle hiding somewhere. I've got the Peterson place. Abigail went still. What? My land. I can sell it. Should bring enough to cover what we're short. That's your property. You bought it with cash money. And I'll sell it the same way. He set the cup down, looked at her directly. This ranch matters more. Why? The question came out raw, almost desperate. Why does my ranch matter more than your own land? That doesn't make any sense, Cole. Nothing about this makes sense. He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he said, Because this place is yours, and what's yours matters to me. The words hung in the air between them, meaning too much and not enough all at once. I don't understand you, Abigail whispered. I know. Cole picked up his cup again, drained it. But you will, soon. He left before she could ask what that meant, the door closing behind him with a soft click. Abigail stared at the bread dough in front of her, her hands gone still. What's yours matters to me. Like it was simple. Like it made perfect sense that a man would sell his own land to save hers. She shaped the dough into loaves with shaking hands and tried not to think about how much she'd started to depend on Cole Bennett's presence in her life. That night, after supper, Abigail went to the barn to feed the horses and found Cole in Smoke's stall again. The old gray had taken to following Cole around like a dog, nickering softly whenever the man appeared. He likes you, Abigail said from the doorway. Cole looked up, his hand on Smoke's neck. He's good company. Better than mine? It was meant as a joke, but it came out wrong, edged with something that might have been hurt. Cole straightened. That's not what I meant. I know, forget it. Abigail moved to the feed room, started measuring out grain. Her hands were clumsy, and she spilled half a scoop on the floor. Damn it! Abigail, I'm fine. But she wasn't fine. The bank letter, her father's death, the weight of this strange marriage, it was all pressing down on her, and she didn't know how to carry it anymore. She heard Cole move behind her, then felt his hand on her shoulder. Gentle, careful. You don't have to do this alone, he said quietly. Abigail laughed, and it came out bitter. I've been doing everything alone my whole life. I'm used to it. Maybe you shouldn't have to be. She turned to look at him, and the expression on his face made her throat tight. He was watching her like she mattered, like she was something worth watching. Why are you so kind to me? She asked. No one's ever... She stopped, swallowed hard. People aren't kind to women like me, not without wanting something. Cole's jaw tightened. I'm not people. Then what are you? I'm your husband, and I meant what I said at the courthouse, even if you don't believe me yet. Before Abigail could respond, Smoke whinnied loudly from his stall, demanding attention. The moment broke, and Cole stepped back, putting distance between them again. I should finish up here, he said. Abigail nodded, grabbed the grain buckets, and fled to the other end of the barn where her hands could shake without him seeing. 3 days later, Cole rode to town to meet with the land agent about selling the Peterson place. He left before dawn and didn't return until after dark, his face grim. Well? Abigail asked when he finally came inside, stamping snow off his boots. He'll buy it. Price is fair. That's good, isn't it? Cole shrugged out of his coat, hung it on the hook. Transfer takes time. Might not have the money before the 20th. Abigail felt her stomach drop. How long? Week. Maybe 2. The bank won't wait 2 weeks past the deadline. I know. He crossed to the stove, warmed his hands. I'll talk to them, see if they'll give us an extension. They won't. I already asked. Cole's hand stilled. When? Last month. Before we got married, she didn't say. Before you showed up and made me think maybe I could actually keep this place. Then I'll ask again, Cole said. Different person asking might get different results. He went to town the next morning and came back with the same grim expression. They said no, Abigail guessed. They said no. She nodded, feeling something heavy settle in her chest. Then I'll sell the horses. Abigail, it's the only option left. 3 horses won't bring much, but combined with everything else, no. The word came out hard, almost angry. Abigail looked at Cole in surprise. Those horses are all you have left of your father, he said. I'm not letting you sell them. You don't get to decide that. The hell I don't. This is supposed to be a partnership, remember? And I'm telling you there's another way. What way? You've already sold your land. We've already taken every loan the bank will give. What else is there? Cole was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working. Then he said, I've got money set aside. Was saving it for something else, but no. Abigail cut him off. You've already given too much. I won't take more. It's not taking if I'm offering. It's taking if you're only offering because you feel sorry for me. Cole's eyes flashed. I have never felt sorry for you. Not once. Not ever. The intensity in his voice shocked her into silence. You want to know what I feel when I look at you? Cole continued, his voice rough. It sure as hell isn't pity. Then what is it? He looked at her for a long moment, and Abigail saw something raw and desperate move across his face. Then he turned and walked out, leaving her standing there with her heart pounding and questions burning in her throat. That night, Abigail couldn't sleep. She lay in bed listening to the wind howl around the house and thought about the way Cole had looked at her. The way he'd said it sure as hell isn't pity. Around midnight, she heard movement from the spare room, footsteps, the creak of floorboards, then a scraping sound like something being dragged across wood. Curiosity got the better of her. Abigail slipped out of bed, wrapped her robe around herself, and crept down the hall. The spare room door was slightly ajar, lamplight spilling through the crack. She shouldn't look. It was his private space, his business. But she looked anyway. Through the gap in the door, she could see Cole kneeling on the floor beside his bed. He'd pulled up one of the loose floorboards, she'd been meaning to fix that for months, and was reaching into the space beneath. When his hand emerged, he was holding something. A tin box, rusted at the corners. Abigail's breath caught. She should leave, should go back to her room and pretend she'd seen nothing. Instead, she watched as Cole opened the box and pulled out a piece of paper. Even from the doorway, she could see it was a letter. Old paper, creased from being folded and unfolded many times. Cole held it carefully, his scarred hands gentle, and began to read. His lips moved slightly, forming words Abigail couldn't hear. And the expression on his face, it looked like longing, like grief, like hope, all mixed together into something that made her chest ache. He put the letter back, pulled out another one. Read that too. Then another. How many letters were in that box? Cole's shoulders were tense, his breathing uneven. He looked like a man visiting graves, like a man holding on to something precious and painful all at once. Abigail backed away from the door, her heart hammering. She made it to her room, closed the door quietly, and sat on the edge of her bed with her hands shaking. What had she just seen? Sleep was impossible after that. She lay awake until dawn, listening to Cole move around in the next room, and tried to make sense of the tight feeling in her chest. The next morning, Cole was already gone when Abigail woke. His coat was missing, his horse too. She fed the animals, made coffee, tried to act normal. He didn't return until late afternoon, and when he did, he had someone with him. Abigail heard voices outside and went to the window. Cole was standing in the yard talking to a tall man with silver hair and expensive clothes. The stranger gestured toward the house, the barn, the land beyond, and Cole nodded, his face carefully blank. Abigail's stomach twisted. She knew what this was before Cole even came inside to tell her. That's Mr. Hutchins, Cole said when he finally entered the kitchen. He's interested in buying the ranch. The words hit her like a physical blow. What? He's offering a fair price. More than fair, actually. Enough to pay off the bank and give you money left over to start somewhere else. I don't want to start somewhere else. This is my home. It's also bleeding you dry. Cole's voice was gentle but firm. Your father's gone, Abigail. The debt's too much. Maybe it's time to let go. Let go? She laughed, high and sharp. You married me to help save this place, and now you're telling me to sell it? I married you because... He stopped, jaw tight. I thought we could make it work. But if we can't, I don't want you drowning because of pride. This isn't about pride. This is about everything my father built, everything my grandfather fought for. They're dead, Cole said quietly. And you're not. That matters more. Abigail felt tears burn behind her eyes, hot and furious. Get out! Abigail, I said get out. Cole left without another word, and Abigail sank into a chair, her whole body shaking. Through the window, she could see him talking to Hutchins again, the two men walking the property line. She'd been a fool, a stupid, foolish woman who'd let herself start to trust him, start to depend on him, start to think maybe he actually cared about something other than making smart business decisions. That night, Abigail ate alone. Cole stayed in the barn until well past dark, and when he finally came in, he went straight to his room without a word. She lay in bed listening to him move around, heard the now familiar sound of the floorboard being lifted, the tin box being opened. What was in those letters? Who had written them? And why did Cole read them like they were the only things keeping him together? The questions ate at her until she couldn't stand it anymore. Abigail got out of bed, marched to the spare room, and knocked hard on the door. It's late, Cole's voice came through the wood. I don't care. We need to talk. Silence. Then the door opened. Cole stood there in his shirt sleeves, his hair disheveled, looking exhausted. Behind him, Abigail could see the tin box sitting open on the floor, letters scattered around it. What are those? She asked, pointing. Cole's face went carefully blank. Nothing that concerns you. Everything in this house concerns me. It's my house. They're private. So was our arrangement supposed to be, but you're the one who brought a buyer onto my land without asking me first. She pushed past him into the room, ignoring his protest. If you're going to make decisions about my life, I get to know what's going on in yours. She reached for the nearest letter, but Cole caught her wrist. Not hard, but firm. Don't, he said, and there was something like fear in his voice. Abigail looked up at him. Why not? What are you hiding? It's not... He let go of her wrist, ran a hand through his hair. It's complicated. Then uncomplicate it. Cole stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he bent down and picked up one of the letters, handed it to her. This one's from 15 years ago, he said quietly. I was 13. Abigail unfolded the paper with shaking hands. The handwriting was rough, unpracticed. The letters cramped together like whoever wrote them wasn't used to putting words on paper. She read, Today I saw her again, the big girl with brown hair who works in the barn. The other hands were laughing at her behind her back, calling her names I won't write down. She didn't cry, though, just kept working like she couldn't hear them. I think that takes more strength than anything. Abigail's breath caught. She looked up at Cole. This is about me. Yes. You wrote this when you were 13? Yes. Her hands were shaking. She picked up another letter, this one dated a year later. She caught me getting beat up by the older hands today. They'd taken my food again, and I was too stupid to just let it go. She scared them off somehow. I don't know what she said, but they left. Then she brought me bread and cheese from the house. Said she had extra. We both knew that was a lie. She gave me her own food. Nobody's ever done that before. Abigail felt the room tilt. I remember that, she whispered. There was a skinny kid, always getting picked on. The hands said he was lazy, but I could see they were just mean. I wasn't lazy, Cole said quietly. I was starving. Hard to work when you haven't eaten in 3 days. She looked at him, really looked, and saw echoes of that hungry boy and the man standing before her. You were that kid? I was that kid. Abigail sat down hard on the edge of the bed, the letters scattered around her. I don't understand. You left. I never saw you again after that summer. My mother got sick. We moved to Denver for better doctors. Didn't help. She died anyway. Cole's voice was flat, reciting facts. I worked whatever jobs I could find, saved every penny, told myself someday I'd come back. Why? Because I never forgot the girl who showed me kindness when nobody else did. Abigail picked up another letter, then another. They spanned years, dozens of them, maybe more. All about her. Heard she's still in Dust Creek, still running her father's ranch, still alone. Wonder if she remembers me. Probably not. I was nobody, just another hungry kid passing through, saved up $300. Maybe next year I'll have enough to go back. Some nights I can't sleep for wondering if she's happy. If someone finally saw what I saw. If she knows she's worth something. Abigail's vision blurred. You've been writing about me for 15 years. Yes, that's... She didn't have words for what it was. Overwhelming, impossible, terrifying. That's insane. I know. Cole sat down beside her, not touching, leaving space between them. I told myself I'd forget, move on, but I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw you feeding those horses, saw the way you held your head up even when people were cruel, saw strength in someone the world tried to convince was weak. I'm not strong, Abigail said, her voice breaking. I'm just stubborn. Same thing, most days. She looked down at the letters in her lap. Years of words, years of thoughts, all about her. A girl nobody wanted, a woman nobody saw. Except Cole had seen her, had been seeing her all along. When I heard your ranch was in trouble, Cole continued, I knew it was time. Told myself I'd help you save it and then leave. Keep my distance. But then I married you and you looked at me like I was doing you a favor when really... He stopped, swallowed hard. You were doing me one. Letting me be close to the person who saved my life. I gave you food. That's not saving a life. It is when you're 13 and so hungry, you've started thinking maybe dying would be easier. Cole's voice was quiet but steady. You showed me people could be kind, that I was worth kindness. Do you have any idea what that did for me? Abigail shook her head, tears streaming down her face now. I spent half my life trying to be worthy of you, Cole said. Trying to become someone who could stand next to you and not be ashamed. And when I came back and found you still here, still fighting, his voice cracked. I knew I'd do anything to help you keep this place. Anything. Even sell your own land. Especially that. Abigail looked at him through her tears. This man who'd married her, who worked himself to exhaustion for her ranch, who'd apparently loved her from afar for 15 years. And she didn't know what to do with any of it. I can't, she started, but the words wouldn't come. I know, Cole said gently. I'm not asking you for anything, Abigail. I just needed you to understand. That's all. He stood up, started gathering the letters back into the tin box. His movements were careful, reverent, like he was handling something sacred. Abigail watched him, her mind reeling. Then she said, Tell Hutchins no. Cole's hand stilled. What? Tell him we're not selling. We'll find another way. There might not be another way. Then we'll lose the ranch fighting to keep it. But we're not giving up. She stood, wiped her eyes. You spent 15 years working to come back here. I'm not letting you sacrifice everything now. Cole looked at her, and the hope in his face was almost painful to see. You mean that? I mean it. He nodded slowly. All right, we fight. We fight, Abigail echoed. She left him there with his letters and went back to her room, but sleep was impossible. Her mind kept turning over everything she'd learned. Cole had loved her for 15 years, had built his entire life around getting back to her, had married her not out of convenience, but out of something that looked an awful lot like devotion. And she had no idea what to do with that information. The next morning, Cole told Hutchins the ranch wasn't for sale. The man left disappointed, and Cole got back to work like nothing had happened. But something had changed between them. There was a weight in the air now, heavy with things said and things still unspoken. Abigail caught Cole watching her sometimes when he thought she wasn't looking. And the expression on his face, it was the same expression she'd seen that night through the crack in the door, longing and grief and hope all mixed together. She started watching him back, noticing things she'd been too scared or too proud to notice before. The way he always made sure she ate before he did. The way he fixed things around the ranch that needed fixing without being asked. The way he talked to the horses like they were people, his voice going soft and gentle. The way he looked at her like she was beautiful. 1 week before the bank deadline, a winter storm rolled in that made the earlier cold look like nothing. The temperature dropped so fast that water froze in the buckets before you could carry them inside. The wind screamed across the prairie like something alive and angry. Cole went out to check the cattle and didn't come back. An hour passed, then 2. Abigail stood at the window, her stomach tight with worry. The visibility outside was almost zero, just white wind and blowing snow. 3 hours. She couldn't wait anymore. Abigail bundled herself in every warm thing she owned and headed for the barn. The wind nearly knocked her down twice before she made it inside. The horses were restless, stamping and snorting. Smoke whinnied when he saw her, his eyes rolling white. "Where's Cole?" she asked the old gray, like he could answer. She checked the barn, the feed room, the tack room. Empty, which meant Cole was still out there in the storm. Abigail grabbed a rope from the wall, tied one end to the barn door, and headed into the blizzard. The wind stole her breath, and the cold bit through her layers like they were nothing. She kept one hand on the rope, following it out toward the east pasture where the cattle should be. She found Cole halfway there, collapsed in a snowdrift. "No," Abigail breathed. She dropped to her knees beside him, shook his shoulder. "Cole? Cole? Wake up." He stirred, his eyes fluttering open. "Cattle," he mumbled. "Need to check." "Forget the damn cattle. Can you stand?" Between the two of them, they got Cole upright. He leaned heavily on Abigail, and she half dragged, half carried him back along the rope to the barn. Inside, she got him sitting on a hay bale and started stripping off his frozen coat. His lips were blue, his hands shaking so hard he couldn't work the buttons. "What were you thinking?" she demanded, fear making her voice sharp. "You could have died out there." "Cattle," Cole said again, his teeth chattering. "They'll freeze. Let them freeze. You're more important." He looked at her, surprise cutting through the cold haze in his eyes. "Since when?" "Since I read those letters," Abigail didn't say. "Since I realized you've been loving me for 15 years, and I've been too blind to see it. Since you became my husband," she said instead. "Even if it's just on paper." She got his coat off, then his boots. His feet were white with cold, and Abigail bit back a curse. Frostbite, maybe. Hard to tell. "We need to get you warm," she said. The barn wasn't warm enough. The house was too far in this storm, which left one option. Abigail grabbed all the horse blankets she could find and made a nest in the hay. Then she helped Cole lie down and wrapped both of them in the blankets, her body pressed against his to share heat. He was shaking so hard she could feel it in her bones. "Just breathe," she murmured, rubbing his arms, his back, trying to get his blood moving. "You're going to be fine." "I'm sorry," Cole said through chattering teeth. "Should have come back sooner. Should have had sense enough not to go out in the first place." "Cattle, I swear if you say cattle one more time, I'm leaving you here to freeze." That got almost a smile out of him. "Yes, ma'am." They lay there while the storm raged outside, Abigail holding Cole and willing warmth back into his body. Slowly, gradually, the shaking eased. Color returned to his lips, his breathing steadied. "Better?" she asked. "Better." His voice was rough, but clearer. "Thank you. Don't thank me for saving you from your own stupidity." But her arms tightened around him anyway, and Cole noticed. She could tell by the way he went still, barely breathing. "Abigail," he said quietly, "what are we doing?" "Keeping you from dying of cold." "That's not what I mean." She knew what he meant. Them pressed together in the hay, her arms around him, his heart beating against her ribs. This wasn't just survival. This was something else. "I don't know," she admitted. "I don't know what we're doing." Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Those letters. I shouldn't have kept them. It's strange, obsessive. I know that." "It's not strange." "It is. Maybe." Abigail took a breath. "But nobody's ever cared about me like that before. Nobody's ever seen me the way you do. How do I see you? Like I'm worth something." Cole shifted in her arms, turned so he could look at her face. "You are worth something. You're worth everything." And the way he said it, quiet, certain, like it was the most obvious truth in the world, made something crack open in Abigail's chest. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Of what?" "Of this. Of you. Of wanting something I don't know how to have." Cole reached up, his cold fingers touching her cheek with infinite gentleness. "Then we'll figure it out together. No rush, no pressure, just together." Abigail closed her eyes, leaned into his touch. "Okay. Okay. Okay." They stayed in the barn until the storm passed, wrapped in horse blankets and each other. And when they finally made their way back to the house through the snow-quiet morning, something between them had shifted into something new, something that might have been the beginning of real. The cattle survived the storm. All 20 head, huddled together in the lee of a rock outcropping Cole had somehow known would shelter them. When he and Abigail finally made it out to check on them 2 days later, the animals were cold and hungry, but alive. "You knew they'd be here," Abigail said, watching Cole count heads for the third time, like he didn't quite believe it himself. Hoped. Didn't know. He moved through the herd, checking for frostbite, injuries, anything that might have gone wrong. "Your grandfather chose this grazing land well, natural windbreaks in all the right places." Abigail looked at the landscape with new eyes. She'd grown up here, walked this land 1,000 times, but she'd never thought about why her grandfather had chosen this particular valley, this specific stretch of prairie. To her, it had just been home. To men like her grandfather and Cole, it was strategy, survival. "How do you know so much about ranching?" she asked. "You said you worked construction, logging, other things, but you know cattle like you grew up with them." Cole was quiet for a moment, his hand on one of the cow's flanks. "My father had a small spread down in Wyoming, before he died." "I didn't know that." "Not much to know. The bank took it when I was 12. That's why my mother and I ended up in Montana looking for work." He straightened, wiped his hands on his pants. "Worked your father's ranch that summer. Then we moved on. You know the rest." But Abigail was starting to realize she didn't know the rest. Didn't know most of it, actually. Cole's life was a blank space filled with hints and fragments. A dead father, a sick mother, years of moving from job to job, and always, always those letters about a girl he'd met once and never forgotten. "You could have had your own ranch," she said, "with the money you saved, the money you used to buy the Peterson place. You could have started over somewhere else, built something that was yours." "I did build something that was mine." Cole looked at her directly. "I built a life that let me come back here. That was always the point." The words sat heavy between them. Abigail wanted to ask more. Why her? Why 15 years? Why any of this? But Cole had already turned back to the cattle. The conversation closed. They drove the herd closer to the barn where they could be monitored more easily. It took most of the day, and by the time they finished, Abigail's hands were numb despite her gloves and her face felt raw from the wind. Inside the house, she made coffee while Cole started a fire in the stove. Domestic tasks, ordinary things, but they felt different now. Weighted with awareness. Every time Abigail looked at Cole, she remembered lying pressed against him in the barn, his heartbeat under her palm, the way he'd touched her face like she was something precious. "Bank letter came while we were out," Cole said, nodding toward the table. Abigail's stomach dropped. She picked up the envelope, already knowing what it would say. Final notice, payment due in 5 days, or the property would be seized. 5 days. They had 5 days, and they were still short. "How much do we have?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "Counting the Peterson sale, about 3/4 of what we need." "And the rest?" Cole was quiet, staring into his coffee cup. "I've been thinking about that." "Don't say sell the horses." "I wasn't going to." He looked up, met her eyes. "There's a card game, high stakes. Happens once a month in Dust Creek, back room of the saloon." Abigail's blood went cold. "No. I'm good at cards. I don't care how good you are. Gambling with money we don't have. It's money we're going to lose anyway if we don't do something." Cole's voice was calm, reasonable, which somehow made it worse. "One good night and we're clear. We pay the bank, keep the ranch, move forward. And one bad night and we lose everything, including the money from your land sale." "I won't lose." "You can't know that." Cole set his cup down, leaned back in his chair. 5 years ago, I played cards in a mining camp outside Denver. Walked in with $20, walked out with $800. That's how I bought the Peterson place. That's how I got here. Abigail stared at him. "You gambled your way to Montana." "I gambled my way to you." He said it simply, like it was obvious. "And I'll do it again if I have to." This is insane. This is the only option we've got left. She wanted to argue, wanted to find some other way, but her mind was blank. They'd exhausted every possibility, sold everything that could be sold, borrowed everything that could be borrowed. And now here they were, 5 days from losing it all, with nothing left but a deck of cards and Cole's quiet confidence. "I hate this," Abigail said. "I know. If you lose, I won't lose." Cole stood, crossed to where she sat, and crouched down so they were eye level. "Trust me. Just this once, trust me." Abigail looked at him, this man who'd loved her from afar for 15 years, who'd married her to save her ranch, who'd nearly frozen to death checking on cattle. This man who looked at her like she was worth something. "Okay," she whispered. "I trust you." Something shifted in Cole's face. Relief, maybe, or fear. Hard to tell. "The game's tomorrow night," he said. "I'll need to leave in the afternoon. Be there when it starts." Abigail nodded, not trusting her voice. Cole reached out, hesitated, then took her hand. His palm was rough with calluses, warm despite the cold. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For trusting me. For letting me fight for this." He squeezed her hand gently. "For letting me fight for you." Then he stood and left the kitchen before Abigail could find words to respond. That night, she barely slept. She kept thinking about Cole in some smoke-filled room, cards in his scarred hands, betting everything they had on his ability to read other men's faces and play the odds. It was reckless, dangerous, the kind of thing desperate people did when they had no other choice, which, she supposed, is exactly what they were. Desperate people with no other choice. The next day crawled by. Abigail did the morning chores, fed the animals, tried to keep busy. Cole was quiet, focused, checking and rechecking the money he'd set aside for the game. He'd changed into his best shirt, still worn, still patched in places, but clean and pressed. He looked like a man preparing for battle. "You don't have to do this," Abigail said when he was ready to leave. "We could just—" "Just what? Let them take the ranch?" Cole shook his head. "I didn't come all this way to quit now." "I know, but—" She stopped, swallowed hard. "What if something happens? What if they cheat, or someone recognizes you from Denver, or—" "Then I'll deal with it." He picked up his coat, shrugged into it. "But nothing's going to happen. I'll play, I'll win, and I'll be back by morning with enough money to pay the bank." He said it with such certainty that Abigail almost believed him. "Be careful," she said. Cole paused at the door, looked back at her. "I'll come back," he said quietly. "I promise." Then he was gone, riding toward Dust Creek through the late afternoon cold. Abigail stood at the window and watched until he disappeared from sight. Then she did the evening chores, made herself supper she couldn't eat, and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. Night fell. The house was too quiet, too empty. Abigail found herself in the spare room where Cole slept, looking at the space where the tin box of letters was hidden beneath the floorboards. She could pull it up, read more of them, try to understand the man who'd written them. But that felt like a violation somehow. Those letters were his private thoughts, his secret heart. He'd shown her a few. The rest weren't hers to take. Instead, she sat on the edge of his bed and tried to imagine what 13-year-old Cole had been like. Skinny, hungry, getting beaten up by older ranch hands. And she'd given him food. Such a small thing. She'd barely remembered it until he'd reminded her. But to him, it had been everything. Abigail lay back on Cole's bed, pulled his blanket around her shoulders, and breathed in the smell of him, soap and leather and something else, something uniquely him. She closed her eyes and tried to will morning to come faster. She must have dozed off because the next thing she knew, someone was shaking her shoulder. "Abigail, wake up." She jolted awake, disoriented. The room was dark except for a lamp someone had lit. Cole stood over her, his face streaked with something dark. Blood, she realized with a jolt of terror. "What happened?" She sat up fast, reached for his face. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine. We need to go. Now." "Go where?" "What? There's no time to explain." Cole was already moving, grabbing things from around the room, clothes, his knife, the tin box of letters. "Get dressed. Warm clothes. We're leaving." Abigail's heart hammered. "Did you lose? Did something happen at the game?" "I won." Cole shoved the letters into a satchel. "I won everything. But then Hutchins showed up." Hutchins, the man who wanted to buy the ranch? He was there, at the game, and when he saw how much I'd won, Cole stopped, his jaw tight. "He accused me of cheating, Abigail felt the room tilt. Were you? Cole looked at her, and the hurt in his eyes made her regret the question immediately. No, he said quietly. I don't cheat. But Hutchins has friends in Dust Creek, important friends. And when a wealthy man accuses a nobody ranch hand of cheating, people listen. What happened? A fight. His friends tried to take the money back. I fought them off, but he touched his face where blood was drying. Someone's going to come looking for me, Abigail. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow. And when they do, they won't just take the money. They'll take the ranch too. They'll say I'm a criminal, that the marriage was fraud, that you were in on it. That's insane. We didn't do anything wrong. Doesn't matter. Hutchins wants this land, and now he's got an excuse to take it. Cole grabbed her shoulders, urgent. So we're leaving, right now. We'll take the money, take the horses, and go somewhere they can't find us. Abigail stared at him. Run? You want us to run? I want us to survive. By abandoning my home, my father's ranch, everything I've fought for? She jerked away from him. No, absolutely not. Abigail, no! Her voice cracked. I won't run. I won't give them the satisfaction. Cole's face was desperate now. Then what do you want to do? Stay here and wait for them to arrest me? Wait for them to take the ranch anyway? I want to fight. You said we'd fight together, remember? This isn't a fight we can win. You don't know that. I know that dead is dead, Abigail, and that's what we'll be if we stay. He grabbed his satchel, headed for the door. I'm leaving. You can come with me or not, but I'm not staying here to die over a piece of land. The words hit her like a slap. A piece of land? This is my family's legacy. Your family is dead. Cole's voice rose, rough with fear and frustration. Your grandfather is dead. Your father is dead. You're alive, and I'm trying to keep you that way. By making me a fugitive? By making me abandon everything? By giving you a chance at a future. He stopped at the door, his back to her. I've spent 15 years working toward this. Toward you. And now that I finally have you, I'm not going to lose you to pride or stubbornness or whatever this is. This is my home. Home is wherever you are, Cole said quietly. For me, anyway, it's always been you, Abigail. Just you. So come with me, please. Abigail felt tears burn her eyes. I can't. Cole's shoulders sagged. For a long moment he stood there in the doorway, and Abigail thought maybe he'd stay. Maybe he'd fight with her, beside her, the way he'd promised. But then he said, I'm sorry, and walked out. Abigail heard the front door open and close, heard the barn door, heard hoofbeats fading into the night. Then silence. She stood in Cole's empty room, surrounded by his things, and felt the world collapse around her. He'd left. Cole Bennett, the man who'd loved her for 15 years, had left. And she was alone again. Abigail sank to the floor, her back against the wall, and let herself cry. Great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. She'd trusted him. She'd let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, someone actually cared about her enough to stay. But everyone left eventually. Her mother, her father, and now Cole. She didn't know how long she sat there. Could have been minutes, could have been hours. But eventually the tears ran out, and she was left with nothing but emptiness and the cold. A sound outside made her freeze, hoofbeats, multiple horses. They were here already, Hutchins and his friends, coming to take what they wanted. Abigail stood on shaking legs, wiped her face. If this was how it ended, fine, let them come. Let them take the ranch. What did it matter anymore? She walked to the front door, opened it. 3 men sat on horses in the yard, but not Hutchins and his friends. The sheriff, and 2 of his deputies. Mrs. Bennett, the sheriff called. Need to have a word with you. Abigail stepped onto the porch, her arms wrapped around herself against the cold. What about? Your husband. He in there? No? You know where he is? Gone. The sheriff exchanged looks with his deputies. Gone where? I don't know. He left. That's unfortunate. See, we've got some questions about what happened at the card game tonight. Mr. Hutchins is saying your husband cheated, stole money, assaulted several men. Cole didn't cheat, Abigail cut him off. And if anyone was assaulted, it was him. Look at his face. I'd be happy to look at his face if you tell me where he is. I told you, I don't know. The sheriff sighed. Mrs. Bennett, I'm trying to give you a chance here. Your husband's in serious trouble. If you're hiding him, I'm not hiding him. He left. The words tasted like ash. He asked me to go with him, and I said no, so he left. One of the deputies leaned over, whispered something to the sheriff. The older man nodded, then looked back at Abigail. We're going to need to search the property. Fine, search. You won't find him. They did search. Went through the house, the barn, even checked the root cellar. Found nothing because there was nothing to find. Cole was gone. When they finally left, the sheriff paused beside Abigail. For what it's worth, I don't think he cheated either. I've known Hutchins a long time, and that man doesn't accuse people of cheating unless he needs an excuse for something. But without your husband here to tell his side, he shrugged. Well, things don't look good. What happens now? Now we keep looking for Cole Bennett. And you? He gave her a look that might have been pity. You might want to think about what you'll do when the bank comes calling. Because married to a fugitive, I don't imagine they'll be too sympathetic about extensions. He tipped his hat and rode off with his deputies, leaving Abigail alone in the dark. She went back inside, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at nothing. Cole was gone. The sheriff was looking for him. Hutchins would get what he wanted, the ranch, the land, everything. And she'd be left with nothing except the memory of a man who'd loved her for 15 years but not enough to stay when things got hard. No, that wasn't fair. He'd wanted to take her with him. He'd begged her to come. She was the one who'd said no. Abigail put her head in her hands and tried to think. The bank would come in 4 days. Without Cole's winnings, which the sheriff had probably confiscated as evidence, they had nothing. 3/4 of the debt, maybe, but not enough. She could sell the horses. That would buy time, if nothing else. Or she could give up. Let Hutchins have the ranch. Walk away from everything her family had built and start over somewhere else. Somewhere far from here, far from memories, far from the ghost of a man who'd written her letters for 15 years. The thought made her physically ill. She stood abruptly, paced the kitchen. There had to be another way, had to be something she was missing, some option she hadn't considered. A knock at the door made her jump. Cole, she thought wildly. He came back. But when she opened the door, it wasn't Cole. It was Edith Carmichael, and behind her a dozen women from Dust Creek. We heard what happened, Edith said without preamble. May we come in? Abigail was so shocked she just stepped aside. The women filed into her kitchen, bringing cold air and the smell of snow. Mrs. Patterson, who ran the general store. Mrs. Chen from the boarding house. The minister's wife. Even young Sarah Carmichael, looking uncomfortable but determined. I don't understand, Abigail said. Edith set a basket on the table. We brought food, and she pulled out a small cloth bag, set it next to the basket. Money. Not much, but every bit helps. Abigail stared at the bag like it might bite her. Why? Because Hutchins is a snake, Mrs. Patterson said bluntly. Always has been, and we're tired of watching him bully people. Your husband didn't cheat, the minister's wife added. My husband was at that game. He saw the whole thing. Hutchins lost fair and square and couldn't stand it. Abigail felt something crack in her chest. You believe Cole? We believe you, Edith said quietly. And we should have done that a long time ago. The women stayed for an hour, drinking coffee, talking in low voices about Hutchins' history of dirty dealings, about the sheriff's reluctance to stand up to wealthy men, about the way things worked in small towns when someone decided you were the villain. When they finally left, Abigail counted the money they'd brought. It wasn't much, maybe $100 total, but combined with what they already had, it might be enough. Might. She sat alone in the kitchen until dawn, running numbers in her head, trying to make the math work. It didn't work. They were still short, not by much, but enough that the bank would say no. Unless... Abigail stood so fast her chair fell over. The Peterson place. Cole had sold it, but the money wouldn't transfer for another week, which meant the land was still technically his, which meant if she could find the deed, prove ownership, she might be able to use it as collateral for a loan. A short-term loan, just enough to cover what they were missing until the sale went through. It was risky, it was complicated, but it was something. She grabbed her coat and headed for the barn. Cole's saddlebags were still there, the ones he'd been packing when he'd asked her to run. She dumped them out on the floor, clothes, the tin box of letters, a knife, matches, and at the very bottom, a leather folder containing papers. Abigail opened it with shaking hands. The deed to the Peterson place. A bill of sale showing the transfer wouldn't be final for another 10 days. And beneath that, Something else. A letter, addressed to her. Abigail unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was Cole's, neater than the early letters, but still recognizably his. Abigail, if you're reading this, I'm either dead or I ran like a coward and left you to face this alone. Either way, I'm sorry. The Peterson deed is yours. Use it however you need to keep the ranch. The money from the sale, too, when it comes through. All of it's yours. I signed the papers last week. My lawyer in town has copies. Everything I own goes to you. I meant what I said about home being wherever you are. But you were right, too. The ranch matters. Your family's legacy matters. And I was wrong to ask you to abandon it. I don't know if I'm brave enough to stay and fight this out. I've spent most of my life running from one thing or another. Old habits. But whether I'm there or not, you'll survive this. You're the strongest person I've ever known. You always have been. I love you. I've loved you since I was 13 years old, and probably will until the day I die. I'm sorry I couldn't be the man you deserved. Cole Abigail read it 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Then she folded it carefully, put it in her pocket, and grabbed the deed. She had work to do. The ride to Dust Creek took an hour through the snow. Abigail went straight to the bank, walked in with her head high despite the stairs, and demanded to see the manager. Mr. Winters looked surprised to see her. Mrs. Bennett, I wasn't expecting— I have collateral for a short-term loan, Abigail said, setting the Peterson deed on his desk. This property is worth more than what I owe you. I need enough to cover my debt, just until the sale finalizes and I can pay you back in full. Winters picked up the deed, studied it. This is in your husband's name. It's in our name, we're married. What's his is mine. Legally, yes, but given the current circumstances— He gave her a careful look. Mrs. Bennett, your husband is wanted for questioning in a criminal matter. The sheriff is looking for him. Under those conditions, I'm not sure the bank can— My husband won the money fair and square. The minister's wife was there. She saw everything. Hutchins is lying because he's angry he lost. Abigail leaned forward, her hands flat on the desk. And you know it. Everyone in this town knows Hutchins is a snake, but nobody will say it because he's rich and connected. Well, I'm saying it. And I'm telling you that if you let him steal my ranch because my husband beat him at cards, you're just as bad as he is. Winters was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, The minister's wife, you said? Yes. And she'll testify to that, if it comes to it? Ask her yourself. Another silence. Winters drummed his fingers on the desk, thinking. Finally, he said, I'll need to verify the deed is legitimate, and I'll need collateral beyond just the land. Something liquid. I have some savings, and the women in town took up a collection. How much total? Abigail told him. Winters did math in his head, frowned. It's close. Very close. But not quite enough for me to justify the risk. Abigail felt desperation claw at her. Please, this ranch is all I have. It's all my family ever had. I understand that, Mrs. Bennett. I do. But I have a responsibility to the bank. The door opened behind them. Both Abigail and Winters turned. Cole stood in the doorway. His face was bruised, his coat torn, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. But he was there. He was alive. And in his hand, he held a thick envelope. The money from the card game, Cole said, his voice rough. All of it, plus interest. He walked forward, set the envelope on Winters' desk. How did you— The bank manager started. I went back. Talked to everyone who was there that night. Got statements from 6 different men saying Hutchins accused me falsely because he's a sore loser. Cole pulled a folded paper from his pocket. Including one from Judge Morrison, who apparently doesn't like Hutchins any more than the rest of us. Winters opened the envelope, counted the money. His eyebrows rose. This is more than Mrs. Bennett owes. The extra is for next year's interest, and the year after that. Cole looked at Abigail for the first time since walking in. So she doesn't have to worry about this again. Abigail couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Cole was here. He'd come back. Well, Winters said slowly, this changes things. With this amount, plus the deed as collateral, I think we can work something out. Cole nodded. Good. Draw up whatever papers you need. We'll sign them. I'll need a few hours. We'll wait. Winters left to prepare the documents, and suddenly Abigail and Cole were alone in the office. "You came back," Abigail said. Her voice came out small, broken. "Of course I came back." Cole took a step toward her, then stopped, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed. "I got about 10 miles out before I realized what an idiot I was being." "You were right. We don't run. We fight." "I thought—" She stopped, swallowed hard. "I thought you'd left for good." "I almost did. I was scared, Abigail. Scared they'd arrest me. Scared they'd hurt you because of me. Scared of everything." He ran a hand through his hair, exhausted. "But then I remembered something you said, about being stubborn. And I figured if you can be stubborn enough to stay and fight, I can be stubborn enough to fight with you." Abigail crossed the space between them in 3 steps and threw her arms around him. Cole caught her, held her tight, his face pressed against her hair. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I should have trusted you, should have believed. No, I'm the one who should be sorry. I asked you to give up everything. That wasn't fair." "You were trying to protect me." "I was trying to run, like I always do." Cole pulled back enough to look at her face. "But I'm done running. From now on, whatever comes, we face it together. Here, on your ranch." "Our ranch," Abigail corrected. "It's ours now. You've earned it." Something in Cole's expression cracked, and Abigail saw the vulnerability underneath. "I don't deserve you." "Yes, you do. You've always deserved me." She touched his bruised face gently. "What happened? Did Hutchins and I had a conversation. He won't be bothering us anymore." "Did you hit him?" "No. But I wanted to." Cole's mouth twitched. "Judge Morrison did, though. Right in the nose. Apparently Hutchins accused him of being in on the cheating, and the judge didn't take kindly to that." Despite everything, Abigail laughed. "I wish I could have seen that. It was satisfying." Cole's expression sobered. "The sheriff dropped the charges. Said there was no evidence of wrongdoing. We're clear, Abigail. It's over." She wanted to believe him, wanted to think that everything would be fine now, that they'd paid the bank and fought off Hutchins and earned their happy ending. But life didn't work that way. There would be other challenges, other debts, other people who wanted what they had. All they could do was face them together. "I read your letter," Abigail said quietly. "The one you left in your saddlebag." Cole went still. "Oh. You said you loved me since you were 13. "I did say that." "Do you still love me?" He looked at her like she'd asked if the sun still rose in the east. "Yes, always. Even though I'm difficult and stubborn and not what anyone would call beautiful?" "Especially because of that." Cole cupped her face in his scarred hands. "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, Abigail. You always were." She kissed him then, there in the bank office, with the door half open and papers scattered across the desk. Kissed him like she'd wanted to for weeks now, ever since she'd read those letters and realized someone had been seeing her, really seeing her, all along. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. "We should probably sign those papers," Abigail said. "Probably." But neither of them moved. They just stood there, holding each other, while outside the window, Dust Creek went about its business and the snow began to fall. They'd survived. Together. And whatever came next, they'd survive that too. They signed the papers an hour later, Abigail's hand shaking slightly as she wrote her name next to Cole's. When it was done, Winters shook their hands with something that might have been respect and told them the ranch was secure for the next 3 years, provided they kept up with the interest payments. 3 years. It felt like a lifetime. Outside, the snow had stopped and the winter sun was trying to break through the clouds. Cole helped Abigail onto her horse, then swung up onto his own. They rode out of Dust Creek side by side, and for the first time since her father died, Abigail felt something loosen in her chest. Hope, maybe. Or just exhaustion finally giving way to relief. "What did you really say to Hutchins?" she asked when they were halfway home. Cole was quiet for a moment. "Told him if he came near you or the ranch again, I'd make sure everyone in Montana Territory knew he accused a judge of fraud. That kind of reputation follows a man." "And he believed you?" "He believed I was desperate enough to do it. Sometimes that's all it takes." Cole glanced at her. "I also might have mentioned that I know about the mining claim he stole from the widow Patterson 3 years back. and the way he foreclosed on the Chen family when they were only 2 days late on a payment. Abigail stared at him. How do you know about that? People talk, especially to someone who's just passing through and doesn't seem important enough to matter. He shrugged. I've been listening to stories about Hutchins since I got to Dust Creek. Figured they might come in handy someday. You're smarter than you let on. I'm desperate. There's a difference. They rode in comfortable silence for a while. The landscape was beautiful in its harsh way. White snow, dark pines, mountains in the distance, like broken teeth against the sky. Abigail had spent her whole life looking at this view, but somehow it felt different now. Less like a prison and more like a promise. Cole, she said as they approached the ranch, that letter you wrote, the one that said everything you own goes to me. Did you mean that? Every word. Why? He pulled his horse to a stop, turned to face her. Because if something happened to me, I wanted you taken care of. You and this ranch. That's all I've ever wanted. That's a lot to give someone you barely know. I know you better than you think. Cole's voice was soft. I've been watching you for 15 years, remember? I know you hate mornings, but you get up anyway because the animals need feeding. I know you check on Smoke 3 times a night when you think he might be getting sick. I know you pretend not to care what people think, but you hear every cruel word and carry it around like stones in your pockets. Abigail felt her throat go tight. That's not fair. What's not fair? You knowing all that about me when I don't know anything about you. Cole looked away, out at the snow-covered valley. What do you want to know? Everything. Start with your father. You said the bank took his ranch when you were 12. What happened? A muscle worked in Cole's jaw. He got sick, couldn't work, couldn't pay the mortgage. They gave him 6 months, then came and took everything. He paused. He died 2 weeks later. I think losing the ranch killed him faster than the sickness did. I'm sorry. Don't be. He was a hard man. Not cruel, but not warm either. The ranch was all he cared about, and when it was gone, Cole shrugged. My mother tried to hold things together, but she wasn't strong enough. We moved around looking for work, and she just got weaker and weaker until he stopped. Abigail didn't push. She could see the pain in the set of his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the reins too tight. That's why you understand, she said quietly, about losing the ranch, about what it means. Yeah. Cole urged his horse forward again. That's why I understand. They reached the house as the sun was starting to set. The cattle were dark shapes in the pasture. The barn stood solid against the wind, and smoke rose from the chimney where Abigail had left a fire burning. Home. They're home now. Cole took care of the horses while Abigail started supper. It felt strange, this domestic routine, after everything that had happened. Just yesterday, she'd thought she was losing everything. Now here they were, moving through evening chores like nothing had changed. Except everything had changed. Cole came in smelling like horse and hay and cold air. He washed up at the basin, then sat at the table while Abigail dished out stew. They ate in silence at first, both of them too tired for conversation. Then Abigail said, I don't know how to do this. Cole looked up. Do what? This. Be married. Be... She gestured vaguely between them. Whatever we are now. We're the same as we were before. Just more honest about it. But I don't know what that means. Do we... She felt her face heat. Do you expect... No. Cole's voice was firm. I don't expect anything, Abigail. We move at whatever pace feels right for you. Could be tomorrow, could be a year from now, could be never. I'm not going anywhere. Relief flooded through her, mixed with something else. Disappointment, maybe. Or fear that never might actually mean never. What if I'm not what you built me up to be in your head? She asked quietly. What if the real me doesn't match the girl in those letters? Cole set down his spoon, leaned back in his chair. You think I spent 15 years in love with some perfect imaginary version of you? Didn't you? No. I was in love with the girl who cried behind the barn when she thought nobody was looking. The girl who had food stains on her dress because she ate standing up while she worked. The girl who talked to horses like they were people and people like they might bite her. He met her eyes. I saw you, Abigail, the real you, messy and stubborn and scared and brave. That's who I loved. That's who I still love. Abigail had to look away before she started crying again. I'm not brave. You married a stranger to save your ranch. You stood up to Hutchins and the bank and me. You survived losing both your parents and still got up every morning to take care of the animals." Cole's voice was gentle. "If that's not brave, I don't know what is. I was just doing what had to be done. That's what bravery is, doing what has to be done even when you're terrified." They finished eating in silence. After, while Abigail washed dishes, Cole sat by the fire and pulled out the tin box of letters. She watched him out of the corner of her eye as he sorted through them, reading one here and there like he was looking for something specific. "Can I ask you something?" Abigail said, drying her hands on a towel. "Anything." "Why did you keep writing them? The letters? After you left Montana that first time, you could have just moved on, forgotten about me." Cole looked at the letter in his hands. "Because writing to you, even if you'd never read them, made me feel less alone. Like there was someone out there who'd understand if I could just find the right words to explain." He glanced up at her. "Does that make sense?" "Yeah," Abigail said softly. "It does." She crossed to where he sat and lowered herself onto the floor beside his chair. Cole looked surprised but didn't say anything, just went back to reading while Abigail leaned against the chair and watched the fire. This was good, she thought. This quiet companionship, this feeling of not being alone. Maybe this was what marriage was supposed to be. "Read me one," she said after a while. "What?" "One of the letters. Read it to me." Cole hesitated. "They're private. You showed me some before. I want to hear more. I want to know what you were thinking all those years." He was quiet for so long she thought he might refuse. Then he pulled out a letter, unfolded it carefully. "This one's from 6 years ago," he said. "I was working a logging camp in Oregon. Hated every minute of it." He began to read, his rough voice turning the words into something almost like poetry. "Winter came early this year. The other men are complaining, but I barely notice the cold anymore. Been cold for so long I've forgotten what warm feels like. Sometimes I wonder if I made her up. If the girl who showed me kindness was just a dream I had when I was hungry and desperate. But then I remember the way she looked at those horses. Like they mattered. Like their comfort was more important than her own. And I know she was real. Is real. Somewhere out in Montana, living a life I'm not part of. I wonder if she's happy. I hope she is. She deserves happiness more than anyone I've ever known. Even if it means I never see her again, I hope she finds someone who sees what I saw. Someone who understands what she's worth." "Ishikiet." Cole's voice cracked on the last words. He folded the letter back up, returned it to the box. Abigail sat very still, her heart aching. "I wasn't happy," she said quietly. "I haven't been happy in a long time. Not until what? Until you came back." She felt Cole's hand touch her hair, gentle and tentative. She leaned into the touch, and his fingers threaded through the strands. "I'm glad I came back," he said. "Me too." They sat like that until the fire burned down to embers, and the cold started creeping in through the walls. Then Cole banked the fire while Abigail lit a lamp, and they went to their separate rooms like they had every night since the wedding. But this time Abigail paused at her door. "Cole?" He turned one hand on his own door. "Yeah? Thank you. For coming back, for fighting, for everything." Something shifted in his expression. "You don't have to thank me." "I do, though, because nobody's ever done that for me before. Nobody's ever—" She stopped, trying to find the right words. "Nobody's ever chosen me. Not like that." Cole crossed the distance between them in 3 steps. For a moment, Abigail thought he might kiss her again, but instead he just pulled her into a hug. His arms came around her, solid and warm, and Abigail buried her face in his chest and tried not to cry. "I choose you," Cole said quietly. "Every day, every hour, every minute. I choose you." That night, for the first time in months, Abigail slept through until morning. The next few weeks passed in a kind of peaceful routine. Cole worked on winterizing the ranch, reinforcing the barn roof, chopping enough wood to see them through to spring. Abigail tended to the animals, managed the house, and slowly started to believe that maybe they'd actually made it through the worst. The cattle were doing well despite the cold. Smoke seemed to have gotten a second wind, following Cole around like a devoted dog. And the townspeople, Well, they were still townspeople, but the whispers had changed. Instead of mockery, there was grudging respect. The Bennetts had stood up to Hutchins and won. That counted for something. Edith Carmichael even stopped by one afternoon with a basket of preserves. "Consider it a late wedding gift," she said, looking uncomfortable. "And an apology. I haven't always been kind to you, Abigail. That was wrong of me." Abigail didn't know what to say. Edith Carmichael apologizing was like watching a river flow backwards. "Thank you," she managed. "Your husband's a good man, better than most around here realized." Edith glanced toward the barn where Cole was working. "You did well for yourself." After she left, Abigail stood in the kitchen holding the basket and feeling like the world had tilted on its axis. Edith Carmichael thought she'd done well. Edith Carmichael, who'd spent years making sure Abigail knew exactly where she stood in Dust Creek's social order. Cole came in for lunch and found her still standing there. "Something wrong?" he asked. "Edith Carmichael apologized to me." "Good. She should have done that years ago. She said I did well for myself, marrying you." Cole hung up his coat, crossed to the basin to wash. "You did do well. You saved your ranch." "She meant it the other way, that you were too good for me." "Then she's an idiot." Cole dried his hands, turned to face her. "I'm not too good for you. I'm barely good enough." "That's not true." "Isn't it? I'm a gambler who almost ran when things got hard. I'm nobody from nowhere with nothing to offer except some money I won at cards and a pile of letters I was too much of a coward to send." "Stop it." Abigail set the basket down hard. "Stop acting like you're nothing. You're the person who saved this ranch, who saved me. That's not nothing." Cole looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "You saved me first, when we were 13. You just didn't know it. That was just food. That was everything." He crossed to her, took her hands. "You were the first person who looked at me like I mattered. Do you have any idea what that did for a kid who'd been told his whole life he was worthless?" Abigail shook her head, tears burning her eyes. "It gave me something to hold on to when everything else fell apart. When my mother died. When I was broke and hungry and working jobs that nearly killed me. I'd remember the girl who'd shown me kindness, and I'd think maybe I was worth something after all." His hands tightened on hers. "So don't tell me you just gave me food. You gave me a reason to survive." She kissed him then, pulling him down to her level, pouring 15 years of loneliness and longing and newfound hope into it. Cole made a sound low in his throat and kissed her back like he'd been waiting his whole life for permission. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Abigail said, "I think I'm falling in love with you." Cole's eyes went wide. "You think?" "I don't know what love feels like. I've never—" She stopped, flustered. "But this thing in my chest when I look at you, this feeling like I can't breathe and I'm breathing for the first time all at once, that might be love. Right?" "Yeah." Cole's voice was rough. "That's love." "Have you felt like that the whole time, for 15 years? Every day?" Abigail couldn't imagine carrying that feeling for 15 years. It had only been a few weeks and it already felt big enough to drown in. "I don't know if I can be what you need," she said quietly. "I'm not good at this. At being vulnerable. At trusting people." "Then we'll learn together." Cole touched her face gently. "I'm not good at staying in one place or believing good things can last. But I'm trying. We both are. What if we fail? Then we fail together. But we won't. Because you're the most stubborn person I know, and I'm the most devoted. Between the two of us, we'll figure it out." They ate lunch side by side, their shoulders touching, and Abigail thought maybe he was right. Maybe stubbornness and devotion were enough. That night, she stood in her bedroom doorway for a long time, looking at the empty bed that had been hers alone for 31 years. Then she walked down the hall and knocked on Cole's door. He opened it looking half asleep and concerned. "Everything okay? Can I come in?" "Of course." Abigail stepped into the room, her heart hammering. "I don't want to sleep alone anymore." Cole went very still. "Abigail, I'm not asking for—" She felt her face heat. "I just want to be near you. Is that okay?" "More than okay." His voice was soft. "But you're sure? You don't have to—" "I'm sure." So they lay down together in Cole's narrow bed, fully clothed, careful not to touch more than necessary. But as the night wore on, Abigail found herself moving closer. Cole's arm came around her. Her head settled on his chest. His breathing evened out into sleep, and she listened to his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her ear. This was intimacy, she realized. Not the physical kind she'd always feared, but something deeper. The trust to be vulnerable with another person. The courage to let someone see you scared and imperfect and still believe you were worth staying for. "I do love you," she whispered into the darkness, so quiet she wasn't sure Cole heard. But his arm tightened around her, and she knew he had. The weeks turned into months. January passed in a blur of cold and snow. February came with slightly longer days and the first hints that spring might eventually arrive. The cattle survived the winter better than expected, and Cole started talking about expanding the herd come summer. Abigail watched him plan their future and felt something settle in her chest. This was real. This marriage, this partnership, this life they were building together. One morning in early March, she woke to find Cole already up and outside. She could see him from the bedroom window, standing in the yard with Smoke, the old gray horse nuzzling his shoulder while Cole stroked his neck. She got dressed and went out to join them. "Morning," Cole said when he saw her. "Coffee's on the stove." "What are you doing out here?" "Just saying hello to an old friend." He ran his hand down Smoke's face. He's been looking better lately. I think the worst of the winter's behind him. Abigail came to stand beside him, added her own hand to Smoke's other side. The horse stood between them, content and warm despite the cold. "My father loved this horse," she said quietly. "I used to think he loved him more than he loved me." Cole glanced at her. "That's not true." "How would you know? You barely knew my father." "I knew him well enough. That summer I worked here, he talked about you constantly. How smart you were, how hard you worked, how worried he was that the other ranch hands didn't treat you right." Cole's voice was gentle. "He loved you, Abigail. He just wasn't good at showing it. He never said it, not once. Some people don't know how to say the words, doesn't mean they don't feel them." Abigail thought about her father, dying in his bed, calling for her mother. Had he loved Abigail? She'd never been sure. "I'm going to say it," she said suddenly. "When we have children, I'm going to tell them I love them every single day, so they never have to wonder." Cole went very still beside her. "When we have children?" "If we have children, I mean," Abigail felt panic rise. "I wasn't assuming, if you don't want—" "I want." Cole's voice was rough. "I want everything with you. Children, years, a whole life. I just didn't think that I'd want that too." "Yeah." Abigail turned to face him properly. "I want it. All of it. I'm terrified and I have no idea how to be a wife or a mother or any of this. But I want to try. With you." Cole pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. "I'll probably be a terrible father. I'll mess everything up. We'll mess it up together." "That's the worst parenting plan I've ever heard. It's the only one we've got." They stood there in the yard with Smoke between them, and Abigail felt the future open up in front of her like a door she'd never known existed. A future with Cole, with children, with a life that was theirs to build however they wanted. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. That afternoon, a rider came from town. Abigail saw him approaching and felt her stomach drop, remembering the last time someone had ridden out from Dust Creek with news. But the rider was just the postmaster's son, bringing a letter. Cole opened it, read quickly, and smiled. "The Peterson sale went through. Money's in the bank as of today." He looked at Abigail. "We're clear. Everything's paid off with enough left over to expand the herd like we talked about." "We did it," Abigail said, almost not believing it. "We actually did it. We did it." She threw her arms around him, and Cole lifted her off her feet, spinning her around in the yard like they were children, like they were young and foolish and in love, which, Abigail supposed, they were. That night, they celebrated with a proper meal: roast chicken, potatoes, fresh bread, and the last jar of preserves Edith Carmichael had brought. They sat at the table that had been Thomas Boone's and his father's before him, and they talked about the future like it was something real and solid they could hold in their hands. 20 more cattle, Cole said. Maybe 30, if we can manage it. We'll need to expand the pasture, reinforce the fencing, build better winter shelters. That's a lot of work. We've got time, and I'm not afraid of work. I've noticed. Abigail smiled. You work yourself half to death most days. That's just habit. When you've been poor as long as I have, you don't stop working even when you don't have to anymore. You're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Maybe we can both learn to relax a little, enjoy what we've built. Cole reached across the table, took her hand. I'm enjoying it right now. After dinner, they moved to the sitting room. Cole added wood to the fire while Abigail settled into her father's old chair. It didn't feel strange anymore, sitting in Thomas Boone's seat. She'd earned it. They both had. Tell me something, Abigail said as Cole sat down across from her. Something I don't know about you, something you've never written in those letters. He thought for a moment. I'm scared of dogs. Abigail blinked. What? Dogs. Can't stand them. Got bit by one when I was 8 and haven't trusted them since. We have 3 horses and you're scared of dogs? Horses are predictable. They'll tell you when they're angry. Dogs just bite you out of nowhere. Abigail laughed so hard she had to wipe her eyes. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Your turn. Tell me something I don't know about you. She thought about it. I can't swim. Never learned. We didn't have much water around here, and by the time I was old enough to learn, I was too... She stopped. Too what? Too big. Too embarrassed to be seen in wet clothes that would cling to me. She looked down at her hands. Stupid, I know. It's not stupid. Cole's voice was gentle. But for what it's worth, there's a pond on the back 40 that's perfect for swimming. Come summer, I'll teach you. Just the 2 of us. Nobody else has to see. Abigail looked up at him. You'd do that? I'd do anything for you. I thought you knew that by now. She did know. Deep down, in the part of her that had spent so long not believing anyone could love her, she was starting to understand that Cole Bennett meant every word he said. I have one more question, Abigail said. Why did you stop writing letters after you came back? I haven't seen you write a single one since we got married. Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Because I don't need to anymore. I was writing to someone who couldn't hear me, trying to make sense of feelings I couldn't express any other way. But now you're here. I can just tell you things. Tell me something now then. Like what? Anything, whatever's in your head right now. Cole leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, and looked at her with an expression so intense it made her breath catch. I'm thinking about how I spent 15 years imagining this. Being in your house, sitting by your fire, having the right to call you mine. And now that it's real, it's better than anything I imagined. Because the real you is complicated and messy, and nothing like the perfect version I built in my head. And that makes me love you more, not less. Abigail felt tears sting her eyes. I'm not sure I deserve that kind of love. You do. You just haven't let yourself believe it yet. Cole stood, crossed to her chair, and knelt beside it. But I'll keep telling you until you do. Every day for the rest of our lives, if that's what it takes. She touched his face, ran her thumb along his scarred cheekbone. I'm going to hold you to that. Please do. They stayed up late that night, talking about everything and nothing. Cole told her about the years he'd spent drifting, the jobs he'd worked, the places he'd seen. Abigail told him about growing up on the ranch, about her mother's death, about the years of loneliness that had slowly convinced her she'd die alone. You'll never be alone again, Cole said. I promise you that. And lying in bed that night with Cole's arms around her, Abigail believed him. Spring came slowly, the way it always did in Montana. The snow melted in patches, revealing brown grass that would eventually turn green. The cattle started moving more, restless after months of cold. And one morning, Abigail woke to the sound of birds singing outside the window. Spring, she said, nudging Cole awake. He opened one eye. What? Listen, the birds are back. They lay there listening to the sound of life returning to the valley. It felt like a beginning. Like everything that had come before, the debt, the fear, the loneliness was just prologue to this. To them. Together. Building something that would last. You know what we should do? Cole said after a while. What? Get married again. Properly this time. Not in a courthouse with a judge who'd rather be somewhere else. A real wedding. Abigail turned to look at him. We're already married. I know. But I want to do it right. I want to stand up in front of people and say vows I actually mean. I want to marry you, and I'm not pretending it's just a business arrangement. I want... He stopped, seeming frustrated with his inability to explain. You want it to be real. Abigail finished. It's already real to me. But yeah, I want everyone else to see that too. She thought about it. About standing in a church, or even just in their yard, with the people of Dust Creek watching, people who'd mocked her, ignored her, treated her like she was nothing. All right, she said, let's do it. Cole's face lit up. Really? Really, but nothing fancy, just simple. Just us saying what we mean and meaning what we say. Perfect. They planned it for May, when the weather would be warm and the ranch would be green again. Word spread through Dust Creek, and to Abigail's surprise, people seemed genuinely happy for them. The women who'd brought money when Cole was accused of cheating all offered to help with preparations. Even Sarah Carmichael, who'd once laughed at Abigail's expense, asked if she could make the cake. People change, Cole said when Abigail expressed her shock. Or maybe you change their minds about you. Either way, let them help. Let them see what I see. So Abigail let them. And slowly, gradually, she started to see herself differently too. Not as the fat bride everyone pitied, but as a woman who'd fought for what she wanted and won. A woman who was loved. A woman who was worth something. The night before the wedding, Cole slept in the barn. Tradition, he said, even though they'd been sharing a bed for months. It's bad luck to see the bride before the ceremony, he insisted. That's ridiculous. We've been married for 5 months. Humor me. So she humored him and spent the night alone in their bed, staring at the ceiling and wondering what tomorrow would bring. Another ceremony. Another set of vows. But this time, everything would be different. This time, it would be real. She fell asleep thinking about Cole's letters, about a 13-year-old boy who'd seen something in her that no one else had, about 15 years of devotion that had somehow, impossibly, led to this, to love, to home, to a future she'd stopped believing she could have. And when she woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of Cole humming in the barn, Abigail Boone Bennett smiled and thought maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be all right. The morning of the wedding, Abigail woke to chaos. Not the romantic, manageable kind of chaos she'd imagined, but real chaos. The kind that came from trying to host an event when you had no idea what you were doing and too many well-meaning people trying to help. Edith Carmichael arrived at dawn with her daughter and 3 other women, all of them carrying baskets and talking over each other about flowers and decorations and where to set up the chairs. Mrs. Patterson brought enough food to feed half of Montana Territory. The minister's wife appeared with a dress she'd altered for Abigail. Not her mother's faded wedding gown this time, but something new. Simple cream-colored cotton with lace at the collar. You can't wear the same dress twice, she said firmly when Abigail protested. This is a fresh start. You need something fresh. Abigail took the dress with shaking hands and went to her room to try it on. It fit better than anything she'd ever worn. The seams let out just enough to accommodate her without making her feel like a sausage stuffed into casing. She looked at herself in the small mirror Cole had hung on the wall and tried to see what he saw. A strong woman, a brave woman, a woman worth loving. She still mostly saw the same plain face and heavy body she'd always seen. But maybe that was okay. Maybe Cole loved her not despite those things, but including them. All of her, not some imagined perfect version. The thought made her eyes sting. You crying in there? Edith called through the door. No. Liar, come out and let us see. Abigail emerged to a chorus of approval from the women in her kitchen. They fussed over her hair, pinning it up in a style that was softer than her usual severe bun. Sarah Carmichael produced a handful of wildflowers and tucked them into the arrangement. There, Sarah said, stepping back. You look beautiful. Abigail waited for the mocking tone, the hint of sarcasm, but Sarah's face was sincere, almost kind. Thank you, Abigail managed. I'm sorry, Sarah said suddenly, for how I treated you before. I was cruel because my mother was cruel, and I didn't know any better, but that's not an excuse. The other women had gone quiet, watching this exchange like it was something significant. Maybe it was. You were 16, Abigail said. We all did stupid things at 16. I'm 17 now and I'm still doing stupid things, but I'm trying to do better. Sarah smiled tentatively. Your husband loves you so much it's embarrassing to watch. Makes the rest of us feel like we're settling. Despite herself, Abigail laughed. It's not always like that. We fight. We mess up. He's scared of dogs, for crying out loud. He's scared of dogs? Edith looked delighted. Really? Got bit when he was 8. Won't go near them. The women dissolved into laughter, and Abigail felt something in her chest loosen. This was what she'd been missing all those years. Not romance or grand gestures, but this simple companionship. Women who saw her as one of them instead of someone to mock. Outside, she could hear men's voices. Cole and the other ranchers setting up chairs, building a simple arch out of pine branches. They'd chosen to hold the ceremony in the yard, with the mountains in the background and the valley spread out below them. "You should see him," Mrs. Chen said, peeking out the window. "He looks like he's about to face a firing squad. Poor man's terrified." "Of what?" Abigail asked. "We're already married. Of messing it up. Of saying the wrong thing. Of not being good enough." Mrs. Chen smiled. Men get stupid when they care too much. The ceremony was set for 2 in the afternoon. By noon, Abigail was so nervous she could barely eat the food Mrs. Patterson kept trying to press on her. Her hands shook. Her stomach churned. This was ridiculous. She'd already married Cole once. Why was she so scared? Because it matters this time. A voice in her head answered. Because last time you were just trying to survive, and this time you're choosing him, choosing love, choosing to believe you deserve this. That was the terrifying part. Not the ceremony or the people watching, but the vulnerability of standing up and admitting she wanted this. That she was willing to hope for a future that didn't end in loss and loneliness. At 1:30, the guests started arriving. Not the whole town, Abigail had made sure of that, but enough people to fill the chairs Cole had set up. Ranchers her father had known, women who'd helped when things looked darkest, even Judge Morrison, who'd apparently punched Hutchins in the nose and become something of a legend because of it. Hutchins himself was notably absent. Word was he'd left Dust Creek for Denver, his reputation in tatters after the card game incident. Abigail felt no sympathy. Some people needed to learn that you couldn't buy or bully your way through life. At 2 o'clock exactly, the minister took his place under the pine arch. Cole stood beside him, looking uncomfortable in a new shirt and pants that actually fit. His hair was combed back, his face freshly shaved, but his hands were clenched at his sides like he was bracing for impact. When he saw Abigail emerge from the house, his whole face changed. The tension bled out of him, replaced by something that looked like wonder. She walked toward him alone. No father to give her away this time, no one to pass her from one man's keeping to another's. She was choosing this herself, walking toward Cole of her own free will. When she reached him, he took her hands. His palms were sweating. "You okay?" she whispered. "No," he whispered back. "I'm about to pass out." "Don't. We've come too far for you to pass out now." That got almost a smile out of him. The minister cleared his throat. "We're gathered here today to witness the marriage of Abigail and Cole Bennett. Now, I know some of you are thinking this is unusual, seeing as how they're already legally married, but these two wanted to do this right, to speak their truth in front of all of you. So that's what we're here for, truth." He looked at Cole. "You want to go first?" Cole swallowed hard, then nodded. He turned to face Abigail fully, still holding her hands. "I don't have fancy words," he started. "Never been good at talking, but I'll try." He took a breath. "Abigail, I've loved you since I was 13 years old. Loved you when I didn't have the words for what love was. Loved you through years of not knowing if I'd ever see you again. Loved you when it would have been smarter to forget and move on." His voice was shaking, but he kept going. "You saved my life when we were kids, not just by giving me food, but by showing me people could be kind, that I was worth kindness. I spent 15 years trying to become someone worthy of you, and I'm still not sure I've succeeded, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying." He squeezed her hands. "I promise to choose you every day, to fight for you, to see you the way you deserve to be seen, to love you even when you don't believe you're worth loving, especially then." Abigail's vision blurred with tears. The minister looked at her expectantly. "Your turn." She didn't have anything prepared, hadn't written down words or practiced in front of a mirror. But looking at Cole's face, this man who'd carried her in his heart for 15 years, the words came anyway. "I spent most of my life thinking I was invisible," she said, her voice rough. "Or worse, visible in all the wrong ways, too big, too plain, too much of everything people didn't want. And then you showed up and looked at me like I was—" She stopped, swallowed hard. "Like I was something precious." like I mattered. Cole's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I don't know if I'm any good at this, Abigail continued, at being a wife or letting someone love me or believing I deserve happiness. I'm probably going to mess it up, get scared and push you away or convince myself this can't be real. She took a shaky breath. But I promise to try, to choose you back, to trust you even when I'm terrified, to build a life with you that's ours, messy and imperfect and real. The minister was wiping his own eyes now. Well, I think that about covers it. Do you, Cole, take Abigail to be your wife? Again. I do. Again. And do you, Abigail, take Cole to be your husband? For real this time? For real this time, I do. Then by the power still vested in me, I pronounce you, well, you're already married, but let's say I pronounce you married with feeling. You can kiss her now, properly. Cole didn't need to be told twice. He pulled Abigail close and kissed her in front of everyone, and she kissed him back with all the emotion she'd spent years keeping locked down. When they finally broke apart, the small crowd was cheering. Judge Morrison stood up. About damn time someone in this town found some happiness. Now let's eat before Mrs. Patterson's food gets cold. The reception was simple. Food spread out on tables in the yard, people mingling and talking, music from a fiddle player someone had hired. Abigail moved through it in a daze, accepting congratulations from people who'd once pretended she didn't exist. You did good, girl, Mrs. Patterson said, pulling her aside. Your daddy would be proud. You think so? I know so. Thomas Boone wasn't always the warmest man, but he loved you fierce. Talked about you all the time at the store. Worried himself sick over whether you'd be all right after he was gone. She patted Abigail's hand. He'd be glad you found someone who sees what you're worth. Cole appeared at Abigail's elbow, looking overwhelmed by all the people in attention. Can we escape yet? It's our wedding. I know, but everyone keeps wanting to talk to me, and I'm running out of things to say. Abigail laughed. Another hour, then we can escape. They made it 45 minutes before Cole grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the barn. Close enough. Inside, away from the noise and the people, he pulled her close. Hi. Hi yourself. We did it. We really did. Abigail rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. No going back now. Never wanted to go back anyway. Cole's arms tightened around her. Just forward. With you. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the dim barn while their wedding reception continued outside without them. Smoke whinnied from his stall, reminding them he existed. Even the horse is judging us for hiding, Abigail said. He can judge all he wants. I'm exactly where I want to be. Eventually they had to go back outside, if only to cut the cake Sarah had made and thank everyone for coming. But Abigail felt different now. Lighter, like she'd been carrying a weight for so long she'd forgotten it was there, and someone had finally helped her set it down. As the sun started to set, the guests began leaving. Edith Carmichael was one of the last to go, and she paused by the door. You were wrong, you know, she said to Abigail. About what? About not being beautiful. You are. You always were. Some of us were just too stupid and mean to see it. She glanced at Cole, who was helping the minister load chairs into a wagon. But he saw it, right from the start. After everyone left, Abigail and Cole stood in their yard watching the last light fade from the sky. The ranch was quiet except for the sound of cattle settling in the pasture and the wind moving through the pines. What are you thinking? Cole asked. That this is real. That we actually made it through everything and came out the other side. She turned to look at him. That maybe I'm allowed to be happy. You are allowed. You always were. I'm starting to believe that. They went inside as the stars came out. Cole built up the fire while Abigail changed out of her wedding dress. When she came back to the main room, he was sitting on the floor in front of the fireplace with the tin box of letters beside him. What are you doing? She asked. Looking at these. Trying to decide what to do with them. Abigail sat down beside him. What do you mean? I don't need them anymore. I was writing to someone I couldn't have, someone I wasn't sure I'd ever see again. But now you're here. You're mine. I don't need letters to feel close to you. So what will you do with them? Cole picked up one of the letters, read it silently, then held it out toward the fire. I was thinking about burning them. Letting them go. No. Abigail caught his wrist. Don't. Those letters are part of your story, part of our story now. Keep them. Why? Because someday when we're old and gray and our children ask how we met, I want to show them. I want them to know that love can be patient, that it can last, that sometimes the best things are worth waiting for. Cole lowered his hand, the letter still intact. You really want children? I really do. Do you? Yeah. His voice was soft. I want to build a family with you, fill this house with noise and chaos and love, give our kids what we didn't have. What's that? Parents who tell them every day that they matter, that they're worth something, that they're loved no matter what. Abigail leaned her head on his shoulder. We can do that. We can try. They sat there watching the fire, the tin box between them, and Abigail thought about the future, about children running through this house, about growing old with Cole, watching the ranch prosper, becoming the kind of people who made it look easy even when it wasn't. It wouldn't be perfect. Nothing ever was. They'd fight and struggle and probably make 100 mistakes, but they'd do it together, which made all the difference. Cole? Yeah? Thank you for waiting for me, for not giving up. He turned to look at her, firelight dancing across his scarred face. Thank you for being worth waiting for. The next morning, Abigail woke to sunlight and the smell of coffee. She found Cole in the kitchen, already dressed and making breakfast like it was any other day. Morning, he said when she appeared. Eggs? Please. They ate together at the table, their knees touching under the worn wood. Outside, the cattle were lowing, the horses were moving in their stalls, and the ranch was waking up to another day. I need to check the fence line on the north pasture, Cole said. Thought I heard something last night. I'll come with you. You don't have to. I can handle it. I know I don't have to. I want to. So they went together, riding out across the greening valley as the morning warmed around them. They found the fence intact, but reinforced it anyway, working side by side the way they'd learned to do. Partners in everything. On the ride back, Cole said, I've been thinking. About what? About expanding. Not just the cattle, but everything. Maybe plant some crops, build a better barn, hire a hand or two to help with the work. That's ambitious. We've got time. And we've got each other. He glanced at her. That's more than most people start with. Abigail thought about where they'd been 6 months ago. Her father dying, the debt crushing them. Cole a stranger she'd married out of desperation. And now here they were, making plans for a future that felt solid and real. You're right, she said. We can do anything. Over the next few months, they proved it. The ranch grew slowly but steadily. They bought more cattle, expanded the pasture, hired 2 ranch hands who actually knew what they were doing. Cole taught Abigail how to swim in the pond on the back 40, both of them laughing and splashing like children while smoke watched from the shore. The townspeople stopped whispering about them, started inviting them to social events, treated Abigail like she was one of them instead of someone to pity. And late at night, when the work was done and the house was quiet, Cole would sometimes take out one of his old letters and read it to Abigail. Reminders of where they'd started, proof that love could survive impossible odds. Listen to this one, he said one evening in late summer. I wrote this when I was 17, working in a mine in Colorado. He read, Sometimes I wonder if I'm crazy, if I've built up a memory into something it never was. But then I remember the way she looked at those horses, like their happiness mattered more than her own comfort. And I know I'm not crazy. She's real. And someday, when I've saved enough money and become someone worth knowing, I'm going to find her again. I'm going to tell her what she did for me. And if she laughs or tells me to leave, at least I'll have tried. At least I'll know. Abigail wiped her eyes. You really wrote that when you were 17? Every word. That's insane. I know. Cole folded the letter carefully. But it worked out, didn't it? Yeah, Abigail said, looking around at the home they'd built, the life they'd created. It really did. That fall, Abigail realized she was pregnant. She told Cole one morning while they were feeding the horses, the words tumbling out in a nervous rush. I'm not completely sure, but all the signs point to, what I'm trying to say is, Abigail. Cole grabbed her shoulders gently. Breathe. What are you trying to say? I'm pregnant. He went completely still. For a moment, Abigail thought he might faint. Then a smile broke across his face, so wide and genuine it made her heart ache. Really? Really, I think. Probably. I need to see a doctor to be sure, but Cole kissed her, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around right there in the barn. We're having a baby. We're having a baby, Abigail echoed, and then she was crying and laughing at the same time. The doctor confirmed it the next week. Baby due in the spring. Abigail was healthy, the pregnancy was progressing normally, and everything looked good. Cole became simultaneously more protective and more terrified. He wouldn't let Abigail lift anything heavy, insisted she rest more, worried constantly about her health. It drove her crazy and touched her in equal measure. I'm pregnant, not dying, she told him one afternoon when he tried to stop her from mucking out stalls. I know, but what if something happens? What if you get hurt? Then we'll deal with it. Together. Like we deal with everything else. She took his hand, pressed it against her still flat stomach. This baby is going to have two parents who love them and each other. That's what matters. Cole's hand trembled against her. I'm going to mess this up. I don't know how to be a father, and I don't know how to be a mother. We'll learn together. What if I'm like my father? What if I'm cold and distant and... You won't be. You're the man who wrote letters for 15 years to someone you thought you'd never see again. You're the man who nearly froze to death checking on cattle. You're the man who sees worth in people everyone else overlooks. Abigail cupped his face. You're going to be a wonderful father. The pregnancy progressed through winter. Abigail grew bigger, slower, more uncomfortable. Cole fussed over her constantly. The ranch hands did most of the heavy work while Abigail managed the books and Cole managed everything else. On a cold night in March, 2 weeks before the baby was due, Abigail's water broke. It's too early, she said, panic rising. The doctor said April, babies come when they're ready. Cole was already moving, gathering supplies, sending one of the ranch hands for the doctor. You're going to be fine, but his face was white with fear. The labor lasted 14 hours. Long, painful hours where Abigail thought she might die, and Cole held her hand so tight his knuckles went white. The doctor arrived halfway through, calm and efficient, talking Abigail through each contraction like this was routine. Maybe for him it was. For Abigail, it was terrifying and excruciating and the longest night of her life. But at dawn, as the sun broke over the mountains, Abigail heard the most beautiful sound in the world, her baby crying. It's a girl, the doctor said, placing the tiny, squalling infant on Abigail's chest. Small but healthy, she's perfect. Abigail looked down at her daughter, red-faced and angry and absolutely beautiful, and felt her heart crack open in a way she hadn't known was possible. Hi, baby, she whispered. I'm your mama. Cole was crying openly, his hand touching the baby's tiny head with infinite gentleness. She's so small. She's perfect, Abigail said. She's ours. They named her Margaret, after Abigail's mother, with the understanding that they'd call her Maggie. And when Abigail held her daughter for the first time, really held her, she understood what Cole had been trying to tell her all along. Love wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up, about choosing someone every day, about seeing worth in another person, even when they couldn't see it in themselves. I love you, Abigail said to Cole as he sat beside the bed, his eyes fixed on their daughter. I don't say it enough, but I do. I love you so much it scares me sometimes. Cole looked up, his face still wet with tears. I love you too. I always have. I always will. Even when I'm fat and cranky and covered in baby spit? Especially then. Maggie squirmed in Abigail's arms, making small noises that might have been protests or just general baby commentary on the world. What are we going to tell her, Abigail asked, when she's older, about how we met? Cole thought about it. The truth. That I was a hungry kid and you showed me kindness. That I carried that kindness with me for 15 years. That when I finally came back, you were struggling and I wanted to help. That we married for practical reasons and stayed together for real ones. That's a strange story. That's our story. Cole reached out, let Maggie's tiny hand wrap around his finger. And I think it's a good one. It shows that love can be patient, that it can grow, that sometimes the best things take time. Abigail looked at her family, her husband and her daughter, the ranch outside the window, the life they'd built from nothing but hope and stubbornness. "Yeah," she said softly. "It's a good story." The years that followed weren't easy, but they were good. Maggie grew into a fierce little girl with her mother's stubbornness and her father's quiet determination. 2 years later, a son arrived, Thomas, named for Abigail's father. Then another daughter and another son after that. The ranch prospered. Cole's instincts about cattle proved sound, and they expanded until they had one of the larger herds in the valley. They hired more hands, built a bigger barn, added rooms onto the house to accommodate their growing family. Dust Creek changed too. Hutchins never returned, and without his influence, the town became a gentler place. New families arrived, old grudges faded, and Abigail Bennett became known not as the fat bride everyone had mocked, but as the woman who'd built something lasting with grit and determination and love. Cole kept the letters in their tin box, stored in a drawer in their bedroom. Sometimes, when the children were asleep and the house was quiet, he'd take one out and read it to Abigail. Reminders of the boy who'd loved her from afar, the man who'd come back for her, the life they'd built together. "Do you ever regret it?" Abigail asked one night when they were both gray-haired and the children were grown with families of their own. "All those years you spent waiting, you could have had a different life." Cole looked at her across the kitchen table they'd shared for 35 years. "I had the only life I wanted, right here with you. Even with all the hard parts? Especially with the hard parts. They made the good parts better." Abigail reached across the table, took his scarred hand in hers. His hands were more scarred now, marked by years of ranch work and raising children and building a life. But they were still the same hands that had held hers at the courthouse, the same hands that had written those letters. "I'm glad you waited," she said. "I'm glad you found me. I'm glad you let me stay." Outside, their granddaughter was playing in the yard, chasing chickens and laughing. Inside, the house was warm, the fire was burning, and everything they'd fought for had come to pass. It hadn't been easy. Love never was. But it had been worth it. Every struggle, every doubt, every moment of fear, all worth it for this. For a life built on patience and devotion, and the simple truth that sometimes the people who see us most clearly are the ones who've been watching all along. Cole stood, held out his hand. "Dance with me." "There's no music." "So? We'll make our own." Abigail took his hand and let him pull her up. They swayed together in the kitchen, no music except the crackling fire and the sound of their granddaughter's laughter drifting through the window. "You know what I think?" Abigail said, her head on Cole's shoulder. "What?" "I think we got our happy ending after all." "We did, and we earned every bit of it." They danced until the sun set and the stars came out, two people who'd found each other against impossible odds, and built something that lasted. A ranch, a family, a love that had survived 15 years of waiting and 35 years of living. And in the drawer upstairs, tucked safely in their tin box, the letters remained. A testament to the boy who'd seen worth in a girl no one else noticed. A reminder that love, real love, was worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth everything. Because in the end, the best love stories aren't about perfection. They're about two imperfect people choosing each other every day, through every hardship, until choosing becomes as natural as breathing. And that, Abigail thought as she held her husband close, was the only kind of love story worth having.